All right, guys, welcome to Press X Podcast, episode 139. Thank you all for being here so early. As always, it's always nice to see you guys hanging out in the chat. It's always nice to see the excitement as well. See people always expressing their excitement for the show, looking forward to it. Makes me feel good. Makes me feel like, excited myself to get it started. So, yeah, thank you for that. And I have a couple of super chats as well as a new member off the bat. So thank you guys. I'll read those super chats in just a couple of minutes. And William Aguilar, thank you, man, for becoming a member. Yeah, I did see you asking about the the situation with the Discord. So anybody who is here or maybe is watching this later on, if you are a channel member, I have a community post out specifically for channel members explaining that situation and what went on there. So go check that out if you're interested. But yeah, we have quite a few different topics to talk about, and I say surprisingly only because, we're over halfway through December now. So this is usually the time when things really start to slow down, and I have no doubt that they will in the coming week or two. Obviously, with the holidays coming up, but still, quite a bit going on in the industry, and I'm excited to talk about some of these topics because some of these topics I think are interesting. Space Gambler Jr., you're saying we need emojis. Yeah, it's strange because I actually completely forgot that is something that most channels do offer for memberships, and I remember there was something I wanted to do regarding emojis a while ago, but it just completely slipped my mind. But yeah, that's definitely something I'm going to look into going into next year. Something that many of you have been asking for some time. I can't, make a promise as to when exactly they're going to be coming, but I'll look into it and I'll see what we can do. I see somebody saying, "Love the shirt, man." Thanks, dude. I'm glad. I said last year I really got big in the Soundgarden. I've always enjoyed them, but I really got into them more recently. See somebody saying the snitch doesn't leak games anymore. Yeah, I know. We lost another leaker, and you guys know how it works. One leaker goes down, another one rises from the ashes. Maybe MBG is going to be the next leaker. Just kidding. I wouldn't want to get involved in that game. It's a dangerous game. It's a game where you can get burned very easily, and I do not envy anybody who who gets the status of being a leaker or an insider, because it's really difficult, I think, to kind of maintain that status. All it takes is just one slip up, and it's a very slippery slope. Yeah, I see. There are like regular emojis that you can use on the channel and in the chat, obviously, but I mean like custom emojis for channel members to get access to. I'm sure you've maybe seen them on other channels, that kind of add a little bit more of a unique flavor to the emojis. That's something I definitely should offer at some point. But with that out of the way, I want to give you guys a rundown of some of the topics that we're going to discuss over the course of this episode, just to, give you an idea. Now, as it always goes with Press X Podcast, things can deviate and change at any moment. So always keep in mind when I give you a rundown of the topics that we're going to discuss that we may run out of time. I may not be able to get to one of these topics, or maybe even a few of them, depending. Some of these topics might be a little bit shorter compared to others. You guys know the name of the game at this point. So we're going to talk, obviously, about Spider-Man 2, because, believe it or not, even though it was really, really a small update, we did get an official update for the first time in over a year regarding Spider-Man 2. I think some people were actually disappointed by it, but the hype is definitely there. So we're going to talk about that. Let me see. I see a Devil Shooter saying, as timestamp guy, I know that too well. Yeah, shout out to you, Devil Shooter, for always doing the timestamps, man. You do a really good job. Sincerely, I mean, I look at the timestamps you do each week, and I'm like, I couldn't do this good of a job. So really, thank you so much for that, man. I'm going to try to see if I can get them kind of integrated into the channel as well so people can kind of click the chapters. Um, we'll see if I can get that working. But yeah, thank you for that, man. Always. We're going to talk about Blue Point Games. It's really funny because I haven't seen too many people talking about this, but I have seen some people talking about it. We covered it in a video. Blue Point is teasing their next game, and man, it's really tough because I don't know about you guys, but this is a studio that I need to know what they're working on next. I need to know. And what makes it just so much more interesting is that apparently they're not working on a remake. That's so surprising. I think a lot of people may have forgotten, but we covered last year, shortly after Blue Point was officially acquired by Sony, that they are not working on a remake or a remaster. They're working on what they're calling, quote, original content, end quote. So we're going to talk about that. They're teasing their next game. Sony is teasing new hardware for next year, new PlayStation 5 hardware. I'm not talking about PSVR 2. They're teasing a new PS5. We're going to talk about that. And yes, we are going to have to talk about the ongoing saga of Microsoft and Activision Blizzard and Sony, because Phil Spencer has come out and said that the only way Sony is going to grow or wants to grow is by shrinking Xbox. And if you think that's bad, wait until you hear what Microsoft's president Brad Smith had to say as he attempts to use Sony's exclusives and their talent and their success against them. Who would have thought we'd reach a point where we're witnessing Microsoft, the multi-trillion-dollar company, playing the role of underdog in any given market? Happens to be the video game market. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about multiple confirmations of some live action adaptations. A God of War TV series is coming. A Death Stranding movie is coming. This is on top of everything else we've already heard about. This is getting pretty insane. And I think actually pretty exciting. I got to be honest. It's concerning. It's concerning because things can go wrong. You know, we know how this works. We know how badly things can go when it comes to live adaptations and video games. But I'm feeling excited because I look at Uncharted, I look at the Last of Us series, and I'm beginning to think, you know, I think Sony might be able to pull this off. I do. We're going to talk about Horizon and how a multiplayer Horizon game has officially been confirmed. Yes, that's right. It's no longer speculation. There's no longer hints. We're no longer looking in the job ads for little clues. No, we have explicit confirmation from Guerrilla. They are working on a multiplayer co-op Horizon game. So we'll talk all about that. We're going to talk about The Last of Us Part 3. Apparently, The Last of Us Part 3 is Neil Druckmann's next game. Okay? And we certainly have some things to talk about when it comes to that notion, and that apparently being a rumor that's apparently it's true. So we'll talk about that. We're gonna also talk about, and I'm sure you're wondering, like, dude, you have it in the you have it in the title, man. It says PlayStation Showcase early 2023. Is that actually a topic or not? So the reason why I want to have this conversation, and I wanted to save it. I gotta be honest. I wanted to save this conversation for like the first week of January because I feel like it would be an appropriate time. But something has come up that has made me want to. I had to discuss this because apparently there are multiple rumors from apparently credible sources claiming that Microsoft is planning to hold a showcase of their own in either January or February of next year. And this really got me thinking, are we seriously about to see Microsoft hold two showcases before Sony even holds one of their own? This is where I have to begin to wonder if Microsoft is planning to do something early next year, and they did a proper showcase in June of this year. Is there a chance that Sony will try to match that or do something of their own? I figured it would make for a good discussion. And then finally, if we have time, we're going to talk a little bit about Hogwarts Legacy and how apparently the last gen versions of these games have been delayed. However, the current gen versions have already gone gold. What's going on here? Is it time for developers to just completely drop last gen game development because it seems like it's actually beginning to hinder development to a degree? So we'll talk about that. I see somebody asking any news on Armored Core. Well, just because that caught my eye, I'll quickly let you know that, I mean, look, apparently, I'm not familiar with Armored Core, but it was confirmed that the individual who was the main designer for Sekiro Shadows Die Twice is directing this game. It's his first time directing a game. And two, they did confirm it's not going to be like the Soulsborne titles. It's going to be very different. So, that's all I pretty much know right now. And there's going to be like a major focus on customization. That's what I've heard so far. All right, now before I dive into these topics, I'm going to acknowledge these super chats. First up, we have Mark Lovin coming out with, immediately talking about The Last of Us, saying The Last of Us Part 3, Ellie becomes Elliot. Well, I don't know, should we kick off the show? Should the first topic be on The Last of Us Part 3? I don't know. I feel like Mark Lovin's tempting me here. What I will say is, I don't think that's going to happen. I see where you're going with this, Mark Lovin. I don't think that's going to happen. I would actually argue, and some people might find this shocking, but I could see it happening. I'll just say it. What I think The Last of Us 3 is going to be, it's going to star Abby, and I think the character's name is Lev. Okay. And they're going to be the main characters. Ellie's not going to be in the game. Previous characters that were associated with Ellie will not be in the game. It's just going to be pretty much a game that focuses solely on Abby and Lev. I'm saying this because if there's one thing that I've learned about Neil Druckmann and what he did with The Last of Us Part 2 is he not only wants to subvert your expectations, but he wants to crush, potentially crush your expectations. So I think that that's what's going to happen. And I say this because we have to keep in mind with The Last of Us Part 2, you played half of the game, of the entire game, as Abby and Lev. So I think that that's just a natural segue for what they're hoping to achieve, which is to make Abby the new protagonist and Lev. Basically, Abby and Lev are going to be the new Joel and Ellie. I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen. Mark my words. I know people are like, we want a prequel, we want Joel back, we want to... Dude, what do you think you're going to do as Ellie? That's what I want to know. Like, I know people are like, oh, Ellie's going to be... I'll tell you, if Ellie's in the game, it's going to be for one reason and one reason only. It's going to be because she's going to team up with Abby. I promise you. That's the only reason. Because Ellie has no desire to go after Abby anymore. She had her chance. She could have done whatever she wanted. And she let her go. And I think that it's just clear when you look at the very end scene of The Last of Us Part 2. Ellie can't even play the guitar anymore. She's lost everything. I think it's just clear that it's like, her like, where's she going to go? I mean, I guess maybe redemption, right? Like if Ellie does show up in The Last of Us Part 3, the only arc I could see them giving her is a type of redemption arc, which would be cool. I would actually like to see that because of how extreme she went with the, with her quest for revenge in Last of Us Part 2. I see people saying new characters. I doubt that. There's no chance. I'm going to be honest. I don't think there's any chance whatsoever. I think there will be new characters that we meet, but I don't think you're going to be introduced to playing as new characters. I don't see that happening. Unless, somebody comes out and takes Abby out with a golf club within the first 2 hours of the game for a reason. And, yeah. So Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll talk more about the last. I mean, we will talk more about the Last of Us 3 later. See, this is where the topics are going to kind of jump around a little bit, but you're saying Abby also let Ellie go. Well, that's why I'm saying like I I have a feeling that The Last of Us Part 3 is going to see if Ellie is in it, like I said, I think it's going to be her teaming up with Abby and Lev. I really see that happening. I feel like it kind of writes itself, you know? Um but yeah, we'll see. I guess ultimately though, all this is to say that I have no doubt in my mind, no doubt whatsoever that The Last of Us Part 3 is in development. And I know a lot of people are like, no, dude, Naughty Dog's working on a new IP. They're working on a new IP. It needs to be stated, and this is really important, I think, for people to understand. We've never had confirmation ever from Naughty Dog, from a job listing, from a leaker, nothing. We've never had confirmation that they were ever working on a new IP. And I guess I'm stressing this because I don't want people to get their expectations out of whack and assume that, oh yeah, this new game that Neil Druckmann said he's working on, because that's what we heard this year. This year at, I think it was Summer Game Fest, Neil Druckmann did say, yes, I can confirm we are working on a new game. Notice how he didn't say new IP. He said new game. So I think it's pretty clear that they're working on The Last of Us Part 3. That could be the game that maybe wraps it up. But I wouldn't hold out too much hope for a new IP, because we also have to understand that a big chunk of Naughty Dog right now is working on the Last of Us multiplayer game. And I just don't see how they could stretch themselves that thin to work on the Last of Us multiplayer while still working on Part 3. And then also, maybe they could be in the very early conceptual stages of a new IP, but I wouldn't hold out too much hope. But moving on here, because I don't want to get too backed up with the super chats. Green Owl, you're saying really hoping Naughty Dog takes some more unique directions with their games in the future, whether it's Jack 4 or a new IP. Yeah, well, I guess what I just said kind of helps answer that. I'm going to tell you now, Green Owl, they're not working on a new Jack and Daxter. I don't think they're ever going to work on a new Jack and Daxter. We've even heard recently that there is a new Uncharted that's going to be greenlit, or was greenlit. It's going to be a reboot. Naughty Dog isn't handling that. And again, we have no way, we have nothing to latch onto when it comes to a new IP for Naughty Dog. I hate to say this, but I think it's true. And I don't think it's necessarily it's not that bad, because it's not like it's going to stay this way forever. But I think right now, what we are seeing from Sony's biggest studios is they're becoming so for example, Naughty Dog is the Last of Us studio now. Sucker Punch is the Ghost of Tsushima studio now. Guerrilla is the Horizon studio now. Insomniac is the Marvel studio now. I know that this sounds like it sucks, but we need to also understand that nothing, there are no other games that have been announced to give us any other notion, to allow us to believe anything other than that. And I'm not, well, you know what? To be fair, Insomniac did release Ratchet and Clank. And I see somebody asking, like, so does this mean like we're not going to see new IP from from Naughty Dog ever, or Sucker Punch? No. I think we are going to see new IP. I just think it's going to take a lot longer than people think. I think right now the main focus is for most of these studios to kind of really lean in to the things that, Jesus, my cats are going berserk behind me, to kind of really lean into the things that are working right now. And then as that continues to climb, they'll maybe branch off from that and begin to, experiment with new IP and do new things. Come on, guys, chill. They're going crazy underneath my feet. We know Santa Monica is working on a new IP. Santa Monica, at least that's the assumption. So yeah, I think these studios will eventually start to work on new IP, but it might take a lot longer than we think. You're saying my mic has my mic's gone low. Did my thing close? Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. My microphone software for some reason just closed out. Should be fixed now. So sorry about that. I don't know why it does that every now and again. So just let me know if it happens again. I just got to bring it back up. That's weird. I don't know why it does that. Again, thank you, William, for becoming a member. Josh Z, you're saying MBG. As someone who has not played the original God of War saga, how did you like the various info about Kratos' past and Ragnarok? I actually thought it was done really, really well. I like the fact that they seemingly leaned into Kratos' past more so in this game than the previous game. And I have to say, I did kind of expect that a little bit, because I noticed that they definitely talked about Kratos' past in God of War 2018, and there were certain parts that they leaned into, but most of the parts that they leaned into were to really, just kind of show you that Kratos feels horrible about it, and he feels haunted by it, and he just wants nothing to do with it. And I feel like in God of War Ragnarok, what they did was they leaned into it more and allowed Kratos to talk about it more and the characters to kind of pry a little bit more, but it was less about him feeling horrible about it, and more, I think, kind of them showing that he's kind of come to terms with it, and he's accepted that, that's my past. I did what I did. I can't run from it. I can't hide from it. I can talk about it. But I'm not that, I think he's just kind of come a long way. And that's basically the feeling I got in God of War 2018, that they want to show Kratos is willing to acknowledge it more, to talk about it more, and isn't as hesitant to do so anymore, but in a way that makes it clear that he's grown. I mean, that to me, that's the biggest thing about God of War Ragnarok, is Kratos, not going into spoilers, but I mean, this can be said for God of War 2018 as well, but especially in Ragnarok, he's just grown so much as a character. It's awesome. I think it was easily the best part of God of War Ragnarok, just seeing how far Kratos really has come. So, yeah, I loved it, man. I loved it. And it's interesting because the God of War TV series that was greenlit, apparently that's not going to focus on the Greek saga. It's going to be starting from God of War 2018 with Kratos and Atreus. And I understand why they're doing that. And what I'm going to be really interested to see is with this TV series, if they plan to acknowledge that and talk about it. Surely they have to. And I think that'll be pretty interesting. I do. Hopefully they do it justice. Christopher, you're saying, what are the odds that Sony has an unannounced first-party game for next year? Do you think we will only get Spider-Man and nothing else? Now, I think this is a great question, simply because it's one that I think a lot of people are wondering right now. We know that Sony, going into 2023, we have, well, honestly, it seems like Sony is putting the load on Square Enix and PSVR 2 for the first half of 2023. Sony's come out and they said, look, Spider-Man 2 fall 2023. So we automatically know, okay, that's coming in the second half. That's coming September, October, November. But people like yourself and me and others are wondering, like, so... yeah, Space Gambler Jr. saying, what is the big red heart button? I actually don't know. So maybe you can test it out and let me know. I saw that too. I'm not sure what it is. If anybody wants to test that out, let me know. But we have Forspoken coming out in January, and I'm going to be real with you guys right now. I don't think Forspoken's going to really... I'm not saying it's going to be a bad game. I'm not saying it's not going to be enjoyable, or it might even review pretty well. I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think Forspoken is going to be able to carry that type of weight that like a bigger first party PlayStation game would. And I just don't think that people are going to, PlayStation 5 owners in particular, I don't think PS5 owners are going to be as satisfied with Forspoken if that's really the only big AAA exclusive title that Sony has for the PS5 in particular. Because I've seen a lot of people, or at least quite a few people, come out and be like, dude, you can't say that because Sony, Sony after Forspoken has all of PSVR 2. They have Horizon Call of the Mountain as well as all the PSVR 2 titles that are releasing. And it's like, I'm going to be honest right now, I'm not counting that. I'm not saying it's not good and it's not something, but there are going to be millions upon millions of PS5 owners who are not buying into PSVR 2, and it's something that I think Sony's going to have to kind of answer, because in January we have Forspoken, and then in June we have Final Fantasy 16. Now, I do think that Final Fantasy 16 is certainly big enough to carry that load. I think that's a big enough game that people are going to be like, okay, yeah, this is a huge PS5 game coming, early summer 2022 or 2023. But that's a long period of time. I think between January and June, that's half a year pretty much. And Sony didn't have a showcase. It's been a while since they've had a state of play. They are clearly letting us know not to expect Spider-Man 2. And this is going to help me kind of lean into this first topic here. I mean, I guess maybe it's not technically the first topic, but something I really wanted to focus on, and that is what is going, like, when I say this, don't take it as I think there's something bad going on, because I don't. But I feel like it's a question that PlayStation fans have to ask right now. What is going on with Sony's first party studios, bro? This is getting crazy. This is getting absolutely crazy, where I am just utterly shocked that we are going to enter 2023 and Sony has almost no new first party games announced whatsoever. That is staggering. That is unheard of. And what it will lead to is quite a few people are going to assume something bad. They're going to assume that, well, it's because they don't have anything ready to announce. They're behind, they're behind schedule and all this stuff. It's like, I don't think it has anything to do with that. And I know people are tired of hearing that, and I don't blame you. Like, believe me, if you're rolling your eyes and you're like, we hear this every week, MBG, we know Sony has all this secret stuff, but it's like, dude, if you go and count how many studios PlayStation has right now, they have more studios than they've ever had in their history. Their studios are bigger than they've ever been in their history. And all of the games that Sony has announced this year, outside of Horizon Call of the Mountain, all of the games they've announced have been from third parties. Dude, Sony is sitting on a mountain right now. They even Death Stranding 2, for as big as that game is, that's a third-party game. Sir Speaks a Lot. I see you asking if I read your super chat yet. You're saying MBG nuked a whole Discord because we were talking about liking the Latina women with big butts. Either someone got jealous of him or he doesn't like them. Which is it, MBG? We all have preferences. Sir Speaks a Lot, bro. I know you read my community post. First of all, no, I don't have anything against that. All right. Just putting it out there. Like, I'm going to be honest. I wasn't even aware of what you guys were talking about. Making me blush over here, right? Because you put me on the spot. Like, I assure you, I had no idea what you guys were talking about. Now, I know nobody's going to want to believe that, but it's true. And I didn't use Discord. That's all it was. I didn't use it. You guys know, I didn't use it. And I felt really bad having that as a perk that new members would want to maybe become a channel member for. and expect me to be there just to find out that I'm not there. It made me feel uncomfortable. It made me feel like it's just, I just didn't want to have to deal with it, to be quite honest. I'm very thankful for the community that was there, and those who were hanging out. But it's just something that I felt the need to do. And I know I didn't give you guys a chance to say goodbye, but that's okay. We still have the live streams. And believe me, there's going to be a lot of live streams in 2023. But thank you for that super chat. Nonetheless, Sir Speaks a Lot. Thank you for that. But to get back, Sir Speaks a Lot, always just throwing a wrench, man. Always throwing a wrench. He loves it. Christopher, to get back to your super chat really quickly, though, to answer your question, what are the odds that Sony has an unannounced first-party game for next year? Let's make something clear. All right. And I know. I tend to speak definitively, and I'm going to try my best to not do that, but I'm probably going to fail. So understand that this is just my opinion. I don't have inside contacts. I don't have a relative that works at Sony and is feeding me the info. It is pure speculation, but it's speculation based upon what we know and what I've been following. And what I'm going to say is that it is guaranteed, and there's the definitive. It is guaranteed that Sony has multiple games locked and loaded that can be announced at any moment from their first-party studios. They've been locked and loaded, ready to go for quite some time. Now, the reason why Sony can sit on these announcements is because of things like God of War Ragnarok. If Sony didn't have God of War Ragnarok, the pressure on them to make some more announcements would have mounted pretty rapidly. If Spider-Man 2 wasn't in the pipeline for late next year, Sony would feel immense pressure. You got to get out. You got to make some announcements. Sony has the advantage right now of their third-party deals and their second-party deals. And I really need people to understand and or at least view it from this angle, where if you're Sony, you have two options, okay? Option number one is let's go out there, let's put on a show, let's generate the hype, let's show the new games, let's go all out. Option number two, let's not do that. Let's just leverage all of our second and third party deals that we've been making over the years. And that is Sony chose option number two for 2022. And it is disappointing that, we haven't heard anything from Sony's studios and they didn't have a showcase. But this is where you see Sony got out in front. Sony made the right moves when they had to make the right moves. When they talked to Konami and got the Silent Hill 2 exclusivity deal. When they talked to Koei Tecmo and got Rise of the Ronin as an exclusive. When they secured Kojima once again to do Death Stranding 2. Right? When they went out and got Final Fantasy 16 and Forspoken. What we are witnessing right now is Sony absolutely leaning on and relying on their second and third party deals. And I don't believe it's because they don't have anything ready to go. I think it truly is because I'm going to be honest. I think it's truly because right now, of course, my cat's going to start doing some weird stuff he's never done before to distract me. I think it's because right now, Sony feels as though they have to time when they're going to have their next show. Because the thing is, guys, and I want to say this again. I've said it previously, but I'll reiterate it here once again. Sony, I think, is well aware that because they decided to skip a whole year and not do a showcase, and I'm telling you, if Microsoft actually does another showcase early next year, I think PlayStation fans are going to be upset. I do. I think PlayStation fans are going to be really upset because we may witness Microsoft do two showcases before Sony even does one. And what I will tell you, here's the silver lining. Here's the glass half full. This is going to put so much pressure on Sony to not just have a good show, but to have like an absolutely amazing show. That's what it's going to do. And I feel like Sony's already there right now. But if their competition holds a second showcase before they even announce a new first-party title, you better believe that it's going to make it so that whether it's June or later, it doesn't matter. Whenever Sony has to do another show, they're going to have to go all out. They're going to have to. And I'm excited for that. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, Christopher, because I got around it once again. Do I see Sony randomly announcing a new game that could drop, sometime within the first half of next year? I do. I would be quite shocked. Truly, I would be quite shocked if Sony plans to go all of 2023 from their first party just doing Final Fantasy and Forspoken as their second party deals, and then basically being like, yeah, we're gonna close it out with Spider-Man. I would be completely shocked, because I'm gonna be honest, as a PlayStation fan, who's always looking forward to Sony's studios, having Horizon Call of the Mountain and Spider-Man 2 is not enough. It's not enough. Like that's not enough for a whole year. And Final Fantasy 16 will be great, obviously. But I think Sony's out of their minds if they think that'll be enough. And I think they know that's not enough. And I think that they're just sitting on a loaded shotgun right now. That's what I think. An auto shotgun at that. Not even a pump action. It's like a endgame level shotgun, I guess. And I mean, I know people are talking about Factions 2, but we have no way of knowing if Factions 2 or the multiplayer Last of Us game, we don't know if that's releasing next year. I mean, I hope it does. I would like to think it does, but we know we're going to get our first proper reveal, but we don't know if it's actually releasing. Press Alpha, thank you for becoming a member, man. Welcome aboard. Appreciate the support. Pragmaticat, member 13 months, you're saying, MBG, the dumb heart button is blocking my view of the comments. It has 5 dumb emojis and only 5 dumb emojis, and it keeps floating bright red onto the screen. Is there any way to get rid of it? I'm going to be honest, Pragmaticat. I have no idea. I was not notified by YouTube about this. I don't know what this is. I don't know what's causing it. This is the strangest. I don't know. I think it's like a new thing they put up. But because I did notice it as well. So I don't know. You might have to go check the settings. I'm thinking about checking myself, but I don't. Yeah, I think it's for everybody. Yeah, I don't know, guys. That is really strange. Sorry, Pragmaticat. I wish I could help you, but this is what YouTube does sometimes. They just implement stuff. They don't tell anybody. It's just there, and then they just like don't explain anything. And maybe I'll have to. Maybe when the stream's done, I'll go check my settings and see if there was like a new option or setting that was added that I wasn't aware of. I would have to imagine there is. So sorry about that, man. I wish I could do something about it now, but I don't want to turn this into a troubleshoot thing. You're saying you turned your phone horizontal and it disappeared. Okay. Well, I guess maybe try to do that for now. Dr. Moda 989, you're saying crazy how much stuff we have coming that's not even first party. Lost Soul aside, Convaleria, Stellar Blade, Rise of the Ronin, Final Fantasy 16, Forspoken, Silent Hill, and more. Can't wait to see more first party. That's exactly what I'm saying, man. Like all those games you just listed, they're not coming from PlayStation Studios, and a lot of those are big games. I mean, I think Final Fantasy 16 is easily the biggest there, but Silent Hill 2 Remake is huge. I think Rise of the Ronin has the potential to be massive if they really nail it. Stellar Blade, Lost Soul aside, these are all games that I think are going to help buffer Sony essentially in their first party. But I think the core PlayStation fan base is getting really anxious because it's like, all right, Spider-Man 2, Wolverine, we know that's coming. Uh, Horizon Call of the Mountain, but Sony, man, like what else you got cooking behind the scenes, man? Like we know you got a lot cooking. And that's how I feel, man. That's how I feel. Like I really want to know, like, studios like Blue Point, right? Studios like Housemark. I mean, these newer studios that Sony has purchased, but like Sucker Punch, right? Sony Bend. Like, what are you guys doing, man? Like, what do you do? We haven't heard anything. And that's exciting because these are top tier studios that we're talking about right now. No offense to some of these second parties, and no offense to any other publisher or studio out there, but these are some of the best studios in the world. I'm gonna be just blunt right now. To me, PlayStation Studios are the best studios in the world. I think that there are studios that can compete with them and are up there, but as a whole, just in terms of how many studios they have, how many different teams they have, how many different IP, all the different IP and all the different games they have, I just feel like PlayStation Studios, to me, they're the best in the world. Yeah, Haven Studio, dude, there are studios I'm forgetting Sony even has. Like, I actually forgot about Haven and Deviation Games. This is what is going on? This is what I'm saying. How is Sony sitting on all this stuff? It's absolute insanity. And it's hard not to, as the months go by without a showcase, right? As the months go by, and at this point, as the year goes by, you just can't help but wonder, like, dude, when are they going to unload all this stuff? Or even just some of it? Fans want to know. And I'm not saying they have to rush it. I want to make that, London studio. The list goes on, dude. The list goes on. A team of Sobi? This is getting crazy. Like, Bungie? Yeah, Bungie has a new game. You see, what I think Sony's doing right now, if I had to guess, I think Sony is actually taking Microsoft very seriously as a competitor right now because they have to. I think Sony is witnessing that their main competitor could not make it happen on their own. So what their main competitor decided to do is, well, we're just going to buy stuff and we're going to take it from you. And we're going to buy stuff that's going to, push our service in front of people. And I think it's Sony is seeing that, wow. So Microsoft's first party studios went from, I think it was originally 7 internal studios. Then it got bumped up to 11 or something like that. And then they bought Bethesda, and then it was I lost complete track, guys. I have no idea how many studios Microsoft technically has now, but it's a lot. It's a lot. And what I'm trying to say here is I think we're going to see content wars. I think that's exactly what we're going to see. We're going to see massive content wars, and it's going to be, I think, amazing. First off, I think for everybody. I know that it's always been about the console wars, and now it's about maybe the acquisition wars. But I think what comes after the console wars, what comes after the acquisition wars, is the content wars. And the content wars, I think, are going to be the most exciting because that's when we start to see the direct results of all these moves that Sony and Microsoft have been making. And I think that Sony is basically trying to sideline right now as much stuff, just save as much stuff as they can because they feel as though they're going to need it. They're going to need it. You look at what Sony just did with God of War Ragnarok, and it's clear that Sony made the decision, you know what? We don't need a showcase because we have not only God of War Ragnarok, but we have the Game Awards, and what we're going to do at the Game Awards, we're going to let our partners shine. Final Fantasy, Death Stranding 2, and you know what? Guerrilla, show off your DLC. And Sony realizes we can get through the rest of the year with that and still keep the momentum. And so I really think it's just Sony doesn't want to underestimate Microsoft. And because if you look at what Microsoft did this year, the reason why I'm really not anxious, but like interested, I should say, to see if Microsoft actually has a showcase early next year is because I'm going to be real right now. Microsoft's last showcase was really underwhelming to me because what they did, and I think it was cool, but it was underwhelming, is they're like, we're just going to show you stuff that's coming out in the next 12 months. They didn't show anything beyond that. And so in a way, it's like, now we're looking at Microsoft almost doing the same thing where they're like, yeah, we're just going to hold on to our stuff. We're going to hold on to our stuff and we're going to just bide our time, you know? Because I think Sony's going to want to have things to answer for, man. I think, when Microsoft starts showing off more Hellblade 2, when they show off State of Decay 3, when they finally show off Fable, when they show off, the Initiatives game, right? When they start to show off some more Bethesda games, I think Sony's going to feel like we have to have things ready to go to push back against that. Yeah, Avowed. Microsoft has a lot going on right now, too. So I think that this is what Sony's waiting for. William, you're saying people are not ready for the next PlayStation showcase. There's 30 first and second party games in development, not including third-party exclusives. Next show will rival their legendary 2015 and 2016 E3s combined. So, William, not only are you, I think, just completely spitting facts right now with pointing out the fact that, yeah, there's 30 first and second party games, but you say that their next show is going to rival their 2015 and 2016 E3. I absolutely think you're correct because we are reaching a peak year for the PS5. If you look at those years, 2015 and 16, those were considered like peak years for the PS4, where Sony had to really start to get people interested in the console, like in a much bigger way. And the only way they were going to do that is with games. And so I actually do think that their next show is going to be possibly one of the best we've ever seen because I don't think they're going to hold back. I don't think they can hold back. I don't think they want to hold back. And I think that they just basically want to boost the PS5 to a level that we haven't seen. But I do also think that the timing in particular is important because not only is Microsoft sitting on a lot of games that Sony might feel the need to compete with, but we also do have to continue to acknowledge the Activision Blizzard deal that's going on and how that might affect or influence Sony and Microsoft's decision making. But I agree with you 100%, William. I feel like me and you are kind of in the same boat here where we're both had the same mentality where it's like, we know what Sony's sitting on. We don't know like everything, but we have a really good idea of what they're sitting on. And I think we also have a pretty good understanding of what some of these announcements are going to mean when they're finally put out there for the PlayStation brand and for the future of this generation. Tech Noir, you're saying going back to PSVR 2, did you invest and why? I haven't yet. And simply put, because I don't know that I have the money to invest in PSVR 2 right now. Just straight up. Like I was expecting it to be expensive, and when I saw like, oh, this is going to be $50 more expensive than the PS5, my hope is that by the time it comes around, I'm going to be able to. But the good news is I have a friend. The good news is I have a friend who is, no matter what, making sure he's going to have PSVR 2 day one because he's been really, really, really excited for it. Like he's more excited for PSVR 2 than he was for the PS5. And for him, it's like a day one. And I talked to him and I was like, yo, man, you want to share? You want to let me in on that? You want to let me in on that when you pick it up? Because I've been dying to try VR. And I want my first VR experience to be PSVR 2. And he's like, yeah, dude. He was totally cool. He's like, we'll buy the games. You thought MBG was a YouTube millionaire? Yeah, I wish, bro. I wish. Let's get my channel up to 500k subs. 500k subs. Let's get these streams packed. No, it's cool. I'm not worried about being the biggest YouTuber or anything like that. I appreciate what we do here. I think it's subtle. I think it's humble, and I like it. I think we got a pretty tight knit community. I appreciate that. But yeah, so the thing is, I'm not going to be able to. I'm very likely not going to be able to invest into PSVR 2 at launch. However, I do have a friend that is, so I will have access to PSVR 2 at around launch, and I'm looking forward to trying it. And my hope is that I don't get too hooked with it. That's the thing about it. Like, I'm still skeptical about VR, and everybody has told me, they're like, dude, like once you try it, it's gonna click. Like, you're gonna get it. You're not gonna have you're not gonna be able to deny how great VR is anymore after that. Not that I've necessarily been denying it, but I'm wondering if when I play it for the first time, if it's gonna be like, well, I need to go out and buy one immediately right now. Yeah, when you try it, you will need it. Yeah, that's what I'm beginning to think. Because I gotta admit, like, some of the games I've seen do look really good. I mean, Horizon Call of the Mountain looks good, but I've seen some other games like After the Fall looks pretty fun. The Walking Dead game looks really good, and there was another one. It was like a sword fighting game I saw that looked pretty sick as well. So I will say that, like, I'm very interested in VR 2, and the investment will happen eventually. It will happen eventually. That I can say. PlayStation Pete, member for 13 months. You're saying platinumed Gotham Knights, pre-ordered Jedi Survivor Collector's Edition, Edge controller, and PSVR 2. See, dude, PlayStation Pete, you're getting it all, man. Yeah, that's the thing, is like a lot of these things, what I'm looking at right now, PlayStation Pete and everybody else, I'm looking at like the first 3 to 4 months of 2023, and it looks insane. Honestly, the first 6 months of 2023 look absolutely insane when it comes to game releases. And it's completely stacked. And this is why I'm almost like, you know what, Sony, please don't announce anything. I would actually be totally cool if you don't have any other games coming out besides Forspoken and Final Fantasy for the first 6 months, because I don't know how I'm going to afford all these games. Like, straight up. I don't even know how I'm going to have all the time to play them, but there are so many games coming out. It's looking insane. It's looking insane. And I see you guys in my comments as well talking about it, where you're listing off all the games you're planning on buying. And I'm like, oh man, that is quite a bit. It is quite a bit. It's a good problem to have. I always say that, but yeah, it's closing in, man. And it's also worth noting, that's assuming that none of these games get delayed. Some of these games could end up getting delayed, and I feel like it's always worth keeping that in mind. But for now, it's looking pretty intense. I think my most anticipated game right now for 2023, though, outside of Spider-Man 2, like for the first 6 months of next year, I think it might be RE4 Remake, man. Star Wars is up there. Harry Potter looks really good. I'm not a big Harry Potter fan, but I think the game looks good. But dude, it's I think for me it's got to be RE4 Remake, because I think it looks incredible. I think it's coming out March 24th. Let me see. Josh Z, you're saying Sony is like Nintendo in the sense that they can survive silence because when they announce something or have an event, it's always big games. Yeah, that's true, Josh. And I think you're right that Sony, I think they do know that. Surely they do. I think that Sony has this understanding that when they put on a show, everybody pays attention. When they put on a show, people know to expect big games. Not like, Sony has their state of plays. And that's the thing, is what I'm curious to know is if Sony has a state of play. I think they're going to have a state of play early next year, but it's going to look so awkward. Is it not going to look so awkward if Microsoft's like, all right, guys, Xbox Showcase, February 2023 or January, even late January 2023. Tune in, and they have a pretty big show with some big games or some decently big games. And then Sony's like, we have a state of play, 20 minutes long. If you want to tune into that, I feel like that's going to look pretty. And that's true. I see somebody saying the last two state of plays were really, really good, and you're right, they were. So I guess I'm trying to say, like, I could see Sony maybe pulling off another really solid, really good state of play, and this might be Sony's tactic for now to bide their time as well. Because I think if one thing Sony has proven in the past 6 months, June and September, the 2 months where people were expecting a showcase, Sony came out and they said, yeah, we're doing state of plays. And I think people were really disappointed, except the state of play in June was amazing. And then the state of play in September was also amazing. And so it's kind of gotten to this point where it's like, it would be hard to be disappointed if the next thing Sony does is a state of play, just because of how good their past two state of plays were. I would actually be pretty excited. PS Reviewer 100, you're saying Kojima confirmed that there's another game announcement coming next year. Do you think it's the Xbox cloud game Overdose? I absolutely do think that's what it is. Yeah. And, I'm going to be honest, it's hard for me to be too excited about this game. I'm very intrigued by it, but I don't know that I'm that excited, simply because I feel like with Kojima announcing Death Stranding 2, I kind of got what I wanted. And what's really interesting is Kojima did talk a little bit more about Death Stranding 2, and this went under the radar. I'm going to talk about this in my next video. Something really interesting that Kojima said in regards to Death Stranding 2 is he said things that weren't possible 3 years ago are now possible, and that this is not just going to be a normal sequel. Basically teasing that there's going to be some crazy stuff going on. Guys, give me 1 second. I got to let my cat out. She's going nuts at the door. All right, sorry about that. My cats are just practically screaming at the door. I meant to let them out before I started. But yeah, I read this about Death Stranding 2, and I'm like, there aren't that many game creators. I see the chat right now. That's funny. I gotta go, guys. See ya. There aren't that many game creators that could say something like that and get me like truly excited, because I'll be like, okay, well, maybe. But Kojima's one that's like, if he's pretty much, because the way he said it, he didn't explicitly mention the PS5, but it's clear that, number one, Death Stranding 2 is maybe a year or two away, maybe longer than that. But Death Stranding 2 is going to be PS5 only. It's not going to be cross-gen. And I think that if there's any creator that's going to maybe try to do some really interesting stuff with the PS5 hardware, do some really what we would consider next-gen stuff, I think it could be Kojima. Yeah, Devil Shooter, you're saying PC. I do think that every PS5 game that's being developed right now is being developed with PC in mind. But did you guys see, I wanted to mention this. I wanted to mention this because I saw that apparently Returnal on PC, the requirements for RAM are like ridiculously high. It's like 32 gigabytes of RAM. And people are like, what's going on here? And I think that's really fascinating, because that automatically means that there's going to be, you're saying, well, it's recommended. Yeah. And it's worth noting. I don't know. I'm not saying this for sure, but I'm just saying that it almost makes you wonder, like, Returnal, they said like, oh, we couldn't really get this game working on PS4 with what we're doing with it. And, it was a game that was made for the PS5, optimized for the PS5. you do have to wonder if maybe just the way it was constructed, because it was constructed with the PS5 in mind, if we're maybe going to see with some future PS5 games that eventually go to PC or maybe are announced, to just be releasing for PC, you do have to wonder if maybe certain requirements are going to be bumped up. It's hard, at the very least, maybe for the SSD, right? I mean, RAM. I don't know. I don't know that there's anything special about the PS5's RAM or anything like that. I see a lot of people saying like bad optimization. Yeah, it could be that too. It could be that. I mean, Sony and their studios are still in the early days of embracing PC, so I have no doubt that it could be that. But I guess I'm just saying, like, we still haven't seen the announcement for a game like Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart for PC, and I feel like that would have maybe been a game that Sony would have talked about by now. And I wonder if it's going to make its way to PC. Like that's one I'm really interested in, Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, because if it ever is announced for PC, then it clearly means, well, all right, this game is possible to run on something other than a PS5. But what would be really interesting to analyze at that point is, what are the spec requirements? Like what are the minimum requirements to get this game running on PC? To me, that'll be interesting to kind of see. And so, not to get too far off what I was talking about, but I can't help but get excited, even if Kojima's maybe he's not just talking about the PS5. I mean, Death Stranding 2 is going to be a PS5 game, but in general, he might just talking about new technology that is now available that just simply wasn't 3 years ago. And maybe this is technology that we haven't, we haven't focused on too much, but he's going to do some crazy stuff with it. And I have no doubt. I have no doubt that Kojima's going to try to pull off something insane with Death Stranding 2. He's going to have a bigger budget. He's going to have more time to I feel like it's easy to forget that Death Stranding was created under immense pressure, extreme circumstances. Like Kojima got kicked out of Konami, had to find a studio, had to start from the ground up, and he signed a deal with Sony, and he basically said, I'll make you guys a AAA game. And he made that game within 3 years. Like I think that's just incredible to think about. Like Death Stranding was made in 3 years. And I know Death Stranding isn't a perfect game, but when you look at the quality of it, I don't think there's any denying. Like this is a high quality game. Like, you made this in 3 years? It's crazy. It makes you wonder, like, how many things were not implemented into Death Stranding 1. Maybe were conceptualized, and Kojima had all these ideas, but it's like, we just can't do this right now. We don't have the time, we don't have the resources, we don't have the manpower, we don't have the budget, whatever it might be. We just gotta tone it down a little bit. That's what gets me excited about Death Stranding 2 more than anything, is the fact that the sky is the limit. I mean, Kojima just opened a new studio. It's state of the art, cutting edge, and I just get this feeling that Death Stranding 2 is going to be a significant leap ahead of Death Stranding 1. And the thing I'm most interested in is when he says it's not going to be a normal sequel. Now, I don't know what that means. Only Kojima knows what that means. But hear me out. I feel like what he could be teasing by saying it won't be a normal sequel is he's basically saying this game is going to have completely different gameplay from the first game. Because I feel like that can really only be interpreted a couple of ways. Is he talking about the story? This won't be a normal sequel in terms of the story. Well, I feel like that's a really broad thing to say, because I mean, every time we get a sequel, yeah, the story is going to be different. People are expecting a different story. People are expecting new characters. I don't think that really qualifies as a different sequel, a different type of sequel. I really think he's teasing some major gameplay changes. I do. And I think that'll be exciting, because I'm going to be honest. I don't really want to do delivery again. I don't. Only because I feel like that's something you can really only get away with once, because it's different. It's not what you expected. It maybe doesn't look the most exciting, but it has a certain loop to it, and you start to feel it. And I think that this time around, it's like, well, Yeah, I don't know, guys. I have a hunch that the gameplay in Death Stranding 2 is going to be nothing like the gameplay in Death Stranding 1. Could be completely wrong about that. But that's what I'm beginning to think. And I personally think that that would benefit Death Stranding 2 immensely. I think Kojima feels as though he wants to, I think, really surprise people. I think that's something Kojima likes to do with all of his games. I think he likes to surprise players and do something that you just maybe didn't expect, you know? And I feel like even with Metal Gear Solid 5, right? Like, yeah, it's the fifth Metal Gear, but it's the first Metal Gear. We're going open world. And yeah, this is open world Metal Gear. And I feel like if you would have said that back in, you know, like even just like 5 years before that, or if you look at MGS4, I think the big surprise with MGS4 is like, you know, oh hey, you thought Snake wasn't going to be an old man, but here he is. He's an old man. Oh, and on top of that, you're going to have a suit that lets you just blend into anything. Like I thought the Octo Camo suit in MGS4 was like one of the most genius gameplay mechanics I've ever seen implemented into a game, and it was so awesome. And that, like, I hope to see just like that level of we're changing things up here with this game. You know, we're doing things differently, different gameplay mechanics, things you weren't expecting. That's what I hope for Death Stranding 2. And I know I got a little bit deviated from your question. You're asking about Overdose. I think Overdose has the potential to be something either really, really great, something that's like, oh my God, this is like a new genre of game. Like, this is incredible. I think it's either going to be that or it's going to be something relatively disappointing. I say this only because if you've listened to the way Kojima has talked about this Overdose game, this is a cloud game. It's clearly like horror oriented, and I think that's awesome. I can't wait to see what it's going to be like. But the fact that it's cloud, and if you look, did you guys see the leaked gameplay for Overdose? There was actually leaked gameplay for Overdose, and I'm just like, I don't know what to think of it because it looked kind of like it looked like there really wasn't much gameplay. You know, if there was gameplay, I couldn't tell like what the player was doing exactly. You know, yeah, that's a good way of putting it. You're saying it looked like something out of Supermassive's playbook. Exactly. It looks very similar to that. So, yeah, you're saying developed with cloud technology, not a cloud game. No, dude, I think it's going to be a cloud game because when we saw that leaked gameplay, it was clearly it was running on a mobile device. It's like what I'm trying to say is it's going to be available everywhere, and I kind of like that. I like the fact that, you know, Kojima's going to be able to tell me like, hey, if you want to play Overdose, it's on your phone. Like, okay, that's not really what I was hoping for. I was hoping for like a proper, you know, console developed horror game from Kojima. But then again, you know, he clearly wants to do something different and what he would consider unique with this game. The way he's talking about it, I think he's made it clear it's a smaller game. It's a smaller game, but it's going to try to do something that's never been done before. And we'll see. We'll see how that goes. I hope it goes well. But, you know, I feel like I have a little bit more confidence in Death Stranding 2 simply because I did play in Platinum Death Stranding 1. And so you guys know I was holding out a lot of hope that Kojima was making the new IP horror game for Sony. And it would be like a proper PS5 game. But instead, it seems like, no, we're going to be getting Death Stranding 2. And it could be more horror-oriented. Who knows? And the horror game is going to be the Xbox Cloud technology developed title. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it turns out. Hicksock, you're saying, I hope Death Stranding 2 is not a shooter. I loved DS1 gameplay. I doubt it. Like, when I say that the gameplay is going to be different, I don't think that automatically means, oh, it's going to be a shooter. Because the one thing I want to emphasize about Death Stranding's gameplay is it wasn't as one track as people, I think, want to believe it was. Like you had many different options at your disposal in how you wanted to take on enemies. You could shoot. You could practically play Death Stranding as somewhat of a third person shooter if you really wanted to. You could. The game clearly like wasn't meant to be played entirely that way, but you could play it that way, and you could play it as a more of a stealth game. What I'm trying to say is, I feel like the overall structure of the gameplay in Death Stranding 2 will be different. Like I think there will still be a lot of the same uh core concepts potentially, but the way it's structured and what you might be doing, I would just be surprised. Like I would be very surprised if Death Stranding 2 is like, so you ready to deliver even more packages this time? Like that would be strange. Like it would be surprising to me, only because to me that doesn't seem like Kojima. That's all. Like it like I just don't see Kojima coming out and being like, yeah, you're gonna deliver more packages. That's what you're gonna do again. Like I think there's gonna be some type of big twist, some type of big like, oh yeah, you're gonna deliver packages, but dot dot dot, and then there's something else. That's what I think. I feel like Kojima's always tried to do that with his games. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm very excited because this is the first time we're seeing Kojima pursue a sequel that wasn't Metal Gear. You know what I mean? And I feel like we only have really like the Metal Gear series to kind of get an idea of like what he might do. But I think this time around, it's a little bit different. Death Stranding 2 will be more Metal Gear Solid. That would be interesting. You know, it's funny too, because it's like if you play Death Stranding, you can tell, like you could just tell, like, yeah, this is the dude that created Metal Gear Solid. Like the element, some small but subtle elements were there for sure. That just made you feel like, oh yeah, he did do another Zone of the Enders game as well. I'm not too, you know what? That's actually, I'm not too familiar with Zone of the Enders. Not too familiar with it, but you're right. I think it did get a sequel. Yeah, the UI felt like Metal Gear Solid. Well, you know, I'm wondering. I feel like the ending of that trailer where it showed the big ship coming out of the water, everybody was looking at that like, dude, that's Metal Gear. Like that's Metal Gear Rex right there. And I'm like, yeah, clearly heavily inspired by Metal Gear. You could see the DNA. But I feel like, dude, watch Death Stranding 2 be like a mech game. That would be the craziest twist. It's like, yeah, you're going to be delivering packages, but now you're not on foot. Now you're in a big ship. I did see people speculating that you're gonna go to space. Now that would be a hell of a twist. But I think I don't know if I'm thinking of space. I think it's going to be like what Williams said actually when he was talking about it being like oceanic and the seas and everything. Because even now I notice Kojima's really, he's pushing what he's calling Octo BB, which is Octopus BB. And that's interesting. And I am wondering, like, is a huge portion of this game going to be like under the ocean or something like that? Jay Shaka, you're saying MBG, bro, have you already explained / addressed the whole Discord server situation? I did, yeah. But if you missed it, man, I don't know if you're still a member of the channel or not, but I have a members only community post that I put out. But essentially what I said was that I just didn't want to have it as a perk for people who aren't channel members yet, thinking that they'll become a channel member and they can expect me in the Discord and that whole thing. So yeah, it's just something that I wasn't able to keep up with. I did thank everybody though, and Jay Shako, dude, thank you for being in there, being involved, setting everything up. I appreciate it, man. It was nice of you to do that. But yeah, Hickzock, I don't think so, dude. I don't expect. I'll tell you right now, I think the last thing that Death Stranding 2 is going to be as a shooter. I think you will be able to shoot things. I think it will be a mechanic for sure, but I don't think that's going to be the game itself. Chris B, you're saying my prediction: Overdose is going to be Kojima Productions' Pentiment. Well, I haven't played Pentiment, but I feel like I get what you're saying there. I don't know, man. Like it's hard to tell what Overdose is going to be because when you listen to Kojima talk about it, you can tell he's looking at this Overdose game for Xbox as his opportunity to just do something, as he put it, that he always dreamed of doing, but the technology just wasn't there. So it's like, I wonder what that could be. I wonder what that is. You know, what is he going to try to achieve here? We'll see, man. I'm looking forward to it. I will say though, at this point in time, I really hope that it's going to be it. You know, what's going to be really interesting is as we go through 2023, we're going to hear from Kojima from both Sony and Xbox, and that's just, I feel like that's probably the best way it could have worked out for both fan bases. But dude, I'm dying to see some Death Stranding gameplay. I can't wait to see the gameplay of Death Stranding. I really can't. That's something that because that I feel like, yes, we finally have the answer. This is what Kojima Productions is working on for PlayStation. But if you watch that trailer, you almost start to think like, okay, we got our answer. It's Death Stranding 2, but like, now I want to see the game. I need to see it in action. So I'm excited, man. I'm excited. I'm excited for anything Kojima's doing, really, and I'm looking forward to it. But Jay Shaka, you're saying, okay, glad you announced it, and it was by far the best perk. It's a shame. Yeah, I understand, man. I know, but don't worry. We still got our community here. We can still chat here, and yeah, and at some point, I hope to maybe bring emojis in, member only or member exclusive emojis. But something else I do want to be sure to talk to you guys about is, you know, we were talking about the games that Sony is sitting on. Spider-Man 2. What did you guys think? Yes, let's talk about the triple anus. That's what we have to talk about. What did you guys think about the update that we got on Spider-Man 2? I'm really interested to see what you guys have to say about this because I did notice that there was some disappointment. There was a little bit of disappointment kind of coming out of the announcement. So for anybody who may be unaware, Insomniac Games was essentially teasing that they had something to share when it comes to Spider-Man 2. Now, this teasing was happening before the new trailer for Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse came out, and, you know, PlayStation Spider-Man was spotted in the trailer, and then we just didn't hear anything. So people started to think like, yo, did Insomniac just tease Spider-Man, like not Spider-Man 2, not the new game, but just they were basically teasing the appearance of PlayStation Spider-Man in this Across the Spider-Verse trailer. And people were like, no way. It's been over a year since we heard anything. But Insomniac did come out. But I have to admit, it was a really, really small update. So essentially what they said is, hey guys, we're here to confirm that Spider-Man 2 is going to launch in fall of 2023. And I feel like the entire internet collectively went, yes, Spider-Man 2, finally. But then at the same time, they immediately went, but I feel like that's what everybody was already thinking. You know what I mean? It's kind of a bittersweet update because it's like, I'm glad that Insomniac actually updated us on this game before the end of the year. I gotta say though, I was just kind of shocked that they didn't show the game at all. No screenshots, no trailer, no nothing. And I saw some people pointing this out. They're like, how come they're not showing this game? And you know what? It got me thinking. I think there's a really good reason why Insomniac Games isn't showing Spider-Man 2. Now, I think we have to remember that Spider-Man 2 is a PS5 only title. It's not going to release on PS4. Okay? I'm beginning to think that the reason why Insomniac refuses to show any screenshots or any footage is because they are planning to basically blow people away, visually speaking, with this game when they show it for the first time. I think the plan is we can't just put out a screenshot. I think that they've probably gotten this game to a level that we just simply haven't seen yet on the PS5, visually speaking. I remember when we covered the announcement of Spider-Man 2 in 2021, it was confirmed that the trailer we were looking at was, if I'm not mistaken, I think it was either in engine or it was in real time or something along those lines. Like basically what was being communicated, and I remember Insomniac developers actually confirmed this because people were kind of calling Insomniac out, and they were calling PlayStation fans out, being like, dude, the game's not going to look that good. Like the game's not going to look like that. And some Insomniac developers were like, no, that's that's in engine. Like that's kind of what the game's going to look like. And it was just like, what? Are you kidding me? And it's interesting to think that trailer is well over a year old at this point. I mean, I'm beginning to think that Spider-Man 2 could really be the game that kind of defines the PS5 for a good long time. MBG, you think a lot of things and most of it's wrong. Yeah, you might be right about that one there, buddy. That's funny. But I do think that though. I do think that what's going to happen, like I think we look at God of War Ragnarok and we're like, wow, this game looks amazing visually. And even like, dude, Horizon Forbidden West, sometimes it's hard to believe that's a cross-gen game. Like it is kind of hard, but it looks so good. But I feel like what we might see with Spider-Man 2 is like, dude, you thought Horizon looked good? You thought God of War looked good? You thought Demon Souls looked good? You thought Ratchet and Clank looked good? No, we're about to show you. We're about to show you what the PS5 can really do. And I know I also want to point this out too, because some people I think express a little bit of frustration. They're like, well, dude, it's not always just about the graphics, right? It's not always just about the graphics. We want to, we want to see some gameplay innovation as well. And I wholeheartedly agree. Like one of the things I'm expecting with Spider-Man 2 is I'm gonna be careful how I word this. I'm not expecting Spider-Man 2 to just come out and be like, wow, this is just a brand new type of game doing things that I couldn't even fathom, because I feel like that's asking a bit too much from a sequel in an established universe and an established IP. But what I do think is that Insomniac will try to go out of their way where it makes sense to do things that may delight us, that may surprise us, where it's like, yo, look at that, and it could be more subtle. That's the thing is I feel like in Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, this was Insomniac's way of really trying to show off, like, see what we could do with the PS5's SSD. I see somebody asking, will it be day one on PC? No, it definitely won't. I know that, like, some PC players still get like that, but I don't, at least they shouldn't get like that with me. I'm not out here being like PS5 exclusive, never releasing on it. Like, dude, have you guys heard? Like, did you not hear what Herman Hulst said? The last thing Herman Hulst said was year minimum. So he's confirming, like Sony's confirmed, like they're not doing day and date. They're just not doing it. And I don't know why people think Sony's going to do day and date. Like, do you know how many PS5s Sony sold over November because God of War Ragnarok is exclusive? Well, I mean, it's PS4 as well, but there's going to be even more pressure on Spider-Man 2. Devil Shooter says day and date will happen. I think it could eventually. But realistically speaking, I don't think it will until Sony feels as though they're just not really prioritizing the console as much anymore. And I think that day will only come when sales maybe start to dip, and either dip or just completely peak. I still think that Sony believes, I could be wrong about this, I think Sony believes that they can push past the PS2. I think they believe that, but we just haven't got there yet. Like, I think Sony thinks that maybe, if not the PlayStation 5, the PlayStation 6, but at some point we will produce a PlayStation console that will sell beyond 155 million units. And it would be really interesting. If Sony could ever achieve that, they would be the first to do so. And Sony would be able to basically prove that we didn't peak, that the console market didn't peak. A lot of what Microsoft is doing, and even a lot of what Sony's doing, they're doing it because they are under the belief that the console market has peaked, that the most consoles you can really expect to sell is between 100 million and 130 million on the high end. But beyond that, you're not going to reach 160. You're certainly not going to reach 180, and you're definitely never going to reach 200 million. And it's really funny to think that with the Xbox One, did you guys know? Because I'll always find this interesting. With the Xbox One, the leadership at Microsoft at the time, they firmly believed that the Xbox One would be the first console to sell 200 million units. They really thought that they were going to be able to push the console market to the next level. And I admire that. I think that's awesome that they thought that. I think that they just really screwed it up, because maybe it could have. Dude, maybe it, like, if you imagine if the Xbox One was a more powerful machine capable of 1080p, didn't have the Kinect at all, and came out at $400 with and Halo 5 wasn't a disaster, it's almost like you kind of got to wonder, like, what could have been? What could Microsoft have achieved in the console space if they just didn't make those really dumb decisions? And that's why I don't want to see Sony stray too far away from the console business, because I firmly believe that we have not reached the peak yet. I do not believe the PS2 was the peak. I don't. I think Sony and Nintendo could go beyond that if they just keep at it. I think the growth might be a little bit slow, and I think some things might have to change in order to make that happen. But we'll see. MBG, did you hear that Fable was down to Microsoft forcing Xbox engines on the Fable team? I did see that. Yeah, that's unfortunate, man. Apparently there were some reports coming out that the reason why we haven't seen Fable yet, and the reason why development of Fable is taking so long, is because Microsoft was insistent that Playground Games use an internal Xbox engine and not any other engine. We'll see how that works out. I mean, I feel like that's not, and apparently the big problem with this is because of contractors. Like, apparently it's creating a lot of problems where a lot of contractors are not either able or not willing to learn a native engine, a proprietary engine, I should say. A lot of these contractors are familiar with, like, other more ubiquitous engines, I guess. So I don't know. I haven't looked into it too much. I want to see Fable. I'm going to be really interested to see what Playground Games does. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I'm a big Fable fan. I'm not. But the fact that they're completely rebooting it and a new studio's handling it, let's see. Let's see what they can do. And I noticed that that Microsoft tried to do that same thing. I forget, did Halo Infinite switch its engine? I feel like, I know Halo Infinite was using, like, the Slip Space engine or something like that, but they never switched it. They never changed it. Yeah. All right. 343 had several. Microsoft has the worst engine in the industry. Yeah, I heard the Fable games are really, really good. I'm excited. I feel like Fable's practically going to be like a new IP. I know it's not a new IP, but I feel like it's basically going to be with this reboot. Like it may as well be. Hmm. Yeah. Halo is on the same engine. Okay. Arkham 927, you're saying Spider-Man 2 will be the Arkham Knight of the Spider-Man games in terms of visuals and combat. Absolutely, man. I hope it goes even beyond that. Like, I'm curious to see if Insomniac with Spider-Man 2 can basically take the crown as like this is the definitive best superhero game ever made. And then I know it's too far away right now. And I think people forget this. I forget about it. And it's because I try, like, it's so far away, but dude, isn't it? My PS5 just made a weird sound, guys. I think my PS5 is trying to tell me something right now. My PS5 is coming alive. It's right next to me here. It just made the weird, like, it wasn't a beeping sound or anything. It just made the weirdest sound, like it almost like it moved. Interesting. What's going on here? Yeah, my PS5 is sentient. That's awesome. I wish you guys could have heard that. Anyway, it must hear me talking about all these future games. It's probably like, I'm going to die. I'm not going to be able to run these games. It's turning. Guys, it's transforming into an Xbox Series S before my eyes. You say no showcase next year, bet? No way, dude. No way. Anyway, what I was going to say is, isn't it insane to think that right now, you know how earlier in this podcast we were talking about all of the different games that Sony's first party studios are sitting on right now that they haven't announced, that they haven't talked about at all? Maybe the most we've seen is like a concept image art, or like a concept image just put out there, or maybe we've learned about it in job descriptions. Putting all that aside, isn't it just insane to think that right now Insomniac Games could possibly be sitting on... All right, let me reword that. Not right now. Let's flash forward to like 4 or 5 months into 2023. Wouldn't it be insane to think that just Insomniac alone could very well be sitting on both Spider-Man 2 gameplay ready to be shown and also Wolverine gameplay ready to be shown? Like, to me, that's insane to think about. That's absolutely insane to think about. That at any moment in time, Insomniac could just come out and be like, yo, here's some Spider-Man 2 gameplay. You guys excited for Spider-Man? Everybody's like, yeah, Spider-Man. And then, like, at any moment after that, I don't think they'll do it before they release Spider-Man. I'm going to be honest. I don't think we'll see Wolverine gameplay before Spider-Man comes out. But it's just crazy to think that, like, even after Spider-Man 2, there's going to be something that could potentially even top that. And I don't know, man. Wolverine, I'm so excited for that game. I know it's so far away, but if they're out of all the superheroes or with the comics and everything, I know that some people are like, I don't want Insomniac to just do, superhero games or be the Marvel studio, but Wolverine is up there for me. You know, I've talked about this before. I see. Insomniac keeps posting about Resistance on Twitter. They won't give it up, man. They just keep posting Resistance on their Twitter account, and they insist like it's not a tease, but they won't stop doing it. It's like, all right. I guess it's just they just like to post Resistance. Why not? But yeah, I can't, dude. I'm eager to see if Insomniac can top themselves with Wolverine, because I feel like Spider-Man 2 is going to be next level. Like, I really think Spider-Man 2 could potentially be the biggest game that Sony drops this entire PlayStation 5 generation. As crazy as that sounds. Because, dude, Insomniac has proven they're on another level. Insomniac is on another level. I really want to see what they can do with Wolverine, though. Because Wolverine is I mean, I know it's not a new IP, but We've seen Wolverine games in the past, not many, and some have been pretty fun. Some Wolverine games have been pretty fun, but this is going to be like the Wolverine game. The Wolverine game. And you bet you're going to get sequels to it. Dude, I want to see Insomniac create their own Marvel universe. That's what I want to see. Himanshu Yadav, you're saying, you think Sony will ever do anything in the FPS genre? As an FPS veteran, PS is not for me till now. If they do, can it match something like CSGO, Valorant, etc.? It's a really good question, Himanshu, because I wonder this myself, where we know that Sony's getting very heavily invested in live service, and we know we're getting The Last of Us Online. So that's one. It's not a first-person shooter, but that's one live service game. We know we're getting now a Horizon multiplayer game, which will likely be live service. But what is interesting to me is that we haven't. I feel like Guerrilla realistically was the only studio underneath Sony first party outside of Bungie that could have done an FPS of some kind. And I don't think Sony's doing any internal FPS games except for Bungie. And what's interesting is apparently I saw it pop up on a job listing recently. Apparently Bungie's next game is actually a third-person shooter, not an FPS, a third-person shooter developed with their Destiny 2 engine. So we see how Sony has reacted. We see how Sony has reacted to potentially losing Call of Duty. And maybe the reason why Sony is kind of panicking about losing Call of Duty is because they actually don't have any FPS games in development. The only game that I can think of that will be a first-person shooter and is in development and is a PS5 exclusive is Deviation Games. And we haven't heard from them in a long time. Now, they're a new studio. They are veteran talent. They are Call of Duty veterans. And they could be making the next big thing. But until we see this game revealed, we don't know. And that's pretty much all I know about. I thought for a long time that the second AAA game that Guerrilla Games had in development, I thought it was a SOCOM or another Killzone or a new FPS, but it wasn't. It's Horizon. Turns out it's Horizon. They've been working on a Horizon multiplayer game since 2018. That's insane. You're saying the head of the studio left a couple of months ago. Yeah, I saw that, Jason Blundell. Not sure what was up with that. Thank you, Lefty Cross, for becoming a channel member, man. Welcome aboard. Appreciate that support. Thank you. But yeah, when it comes to an FPS from Sony, I'm doubtful. I am. And I feel like Sony's reaction to Call of Duty may change things. If Microsoft does end up getting Activision Blizzard, I do think Call of Duty will remain on PlayStation for a long, long time, and I don't think Sony will have to worry, but I think Sony might want to try to invest a little bit more. And I know people say like, well, dude, Sony has Bungie. They're one of the best studios in the world when it comes to creating first-person shooters. Why can't Sony just task Bungie with making a god-tier new first-person shooter? Well, I think we have to understand, if you look at the way the deal between Sony and Bungie was handled, it's pretty clear that Sony can't really tell them to do anything. At least that's the feeling I get. Everything that was agreed upon with the Bungie deal was done under the conditions that essentially Sony can't tell Bungie what to do or how to do it. And Sony was just like, okay, we just want you. Like, we just got to make sure no one else can have you. We just got to make sure we have you as part of Sony and that we can make money from you. But when it comes to autonomy, I think that out of every single studio that Sony owns, Bungie by far has the most autonomy. Yeah, they can ask them. I think Sony can make a request, But Bungie, it's really interesting because Bungie has proven that they're difficult to work with. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean Bungie has proven that they're like an outlier in the industry where they are seemingly one of the only studios that can basically say, yeah, we're underneath a publisher, but we do what we want and we're independent. And the fact that they got away from Microsoft, the fact that they got away from Activision and still come out kind of on top, that's kind of crazy. And so I feel like honestly the way Sony handled Bungie was probably the smartest way they could have, where it's like, look, we want you to be part of PlayStation, but you can do whatever. Like we're not going to bother you. All right, maybe the most Sony will ask is, do you think you could maybe start to teach some of our studios some of your tricks? Some of the things you've learned on how to handle a live service game, how to grow a live service game, things like that. Can we use your expertise? It almost seems like Sony hired Bungie. I mean, I know they bought them and they own them, but it really comes off as like, we need you to kind of lead the way for us with live service games. Because I still think that a lot of people forget what Jim Ryan said. And I didn't forget it because I'm telling you, this is going to be an inflection point with not just Sony and PlayStation, but in the entire industry, specifically the console market. And the way things have been for a long time, the expectations, Jim Ryan straight up called out Microsoft and was like, we don't believe the future of the gaming industry is subscriptions like Game Pass, like what we see in TV and music, like Spotify and Netflix. He straight up said, like, to in Sony's view, that's not the future of our industry. That's not where future success lies. That's not where future growth lies. To Jim Ryan, future success and future growth lies in live service games, and I think he's right. And I know that a lot of PlayStation fans cringe at the sound of that, at the idea of live service. But it's worth noting that if you look at the top 10 most played games on PlayStation, almost all of them, if not all of them, they're all live service games. And none of them Sony own. Not a one. Sony's going to keep banking on their games, on single player games, on these big budget narrative driven games. That's never going to change. I don't think people really understand like that. That's what drives. I mean, people do understand, but I think some people, they get a little bit too nervous and fearmonger a little bit, thinking that, well, if Sony has a successful live service game, then that means they're not going to make any more God of Wars, or we're not going to get any new IP. No, that's not what's going to happen. So Sony has the worst thing that I could ever see happening if Sony strikes gold with a live service game. Let's just say that this Last of Us game, multiplayer game, blows up and becomes as big as like GTA Online, as Fortnite. I think that's unrealistic, but just humor me here. What will have to happen at that point is Sony's going to have to ramp up. Like there's going to have to be a lot of resources funneled in to this game to keep it growing, to keep it getting bigger, and to make sure that they can just keep it, a well-oiled machine. So what will likely happen at that point is a portion of Naughty Dog will have to stay on that game perpetually, and Sony will just have to basically almost like carve out a whole nother studio, or potentially even more studios, to kind of put them on that. I just don't see a scenario in where it's like, oh, our Last of Us multiplayer game is now at the number 2 or number 3 most played game in the world, and it's blowing up like Fortnite, like GTA Online. We need to take Santa Monica Studio, and we need to take all those developers and forget what you're working on, forget this new IP, forget another God of War. You guys need to go work on this with Naughty Dog and keep this running. I just don't think that would happen. Could it happen? It could. It could. But I just don't. I think that would be too risky for Sony. If there's one thing that I think Sony trying to do live service games tells us is they're not willing to put all their eggs in one basket. And I think people need to maybe kind of understand that. See, you're saying MBG prime example is Bungie. They are more than 1,000 employees only for Destiny. If Naughty Dog is successful with factions, I think Naughty Dog will grow a lot. What do you think? Yeah, I think so too, man. I think that what we could end up seeing is a studio like Naughty Dog underneath Sony becoming as big, as massive as Bungie. You know, I don't think that it means that they're going to take an already established studio underneath them and integrate them into Bungie, because I feel like that's what Activision did, man. And I feel like Rockstar almost kind of did that too, where, you know, what do Rockstar and Activision have in common? They both have like some of the biggest, they each have one of the biggest live service games in the world. And now Rockstar doesn't make new games. They used to make new games all the time. Now they don't. They just make GTA Online content. Activision used to have a bunch of different studios. All those studios have been folded into Infinity Ward or Sledgehammer or Treyarch to become Call of Duty studios. And it's like, you know, they didn't have to do that, but they wanted to because they're putting all their eggs in one basket. There's a reason why Activision Blizzard wants to sell, man. Like, people were telling me that. They're like, dude, Activision went to Xbox. Like, they want it to be bought. Yeah, why do you think that is? They put all their eggs in one basket. All right, Devil Shooter. I appreciate you stopping by, man. Give you a quick shout out before you leave. Shout out to Devil Shooter. He has to head out, but he always does the timestamps for us within a day or two of the podcast being done. So thanks, man. I appreciate you being here. But yeah, I think that I think if anything, Sony is just proving that they want to grow, they want to be more global, they want to expand, they want the PlayStation brand to be more than just single player narrative driven games. And I think that's smart because PlayStation has always been more than that, and it certainly now more than ever has the ability to be way more than that. I think underneath Jim Ryan's leadership, what we're seeing is a Sony that is trying to bring the PlayStation brand to a level that it just never has achieved before. And I don't think it could achieve that level in the past because gaming wasn't nearly as big as it is now. And gaming has changed in a lot of ways. You know, we live in a day and age now with video games where you can buy God of War Ragnarok for $70, you know, play it on your console for 50 to 60 hours, get one of the best narrative driven stories or games out there, you know, platinum the game. And when you're done with it, you can then close the game and just, now I'm going to just go on Fortnite and do a couple rounds and maybe buy a new skin. And then when I'm done that, I might hop on FIFA or GTA Online. And, you know, I'll wait for the next big Sony exclusive. Maybe you're not interested in Forspoken. Maybe you're not interested in Final Fantasy 16. So then you might think, well, you know what? The next big Sony game I'm interested in is Spider-Man 2, and that's not coming out till the end of next year. So until then, I'm just going to keep playing my FIFA and my Fortnite and my GTA Online and my Apex Legends and whatever else it is that people, you know, these live service games. And don't you see that, like, Sony's looking at this and they're like, dude, we have a whole market here that they dedicate their time and their money and their loyalty. They put their loyalty into our single player games and they love us for that. But once they're done those single player games, they're gone. Like, and they come back, but they're gone. And instead we lose them to Activision, to Rockstar, to EA, to whoever else, right? And so it seems to me that what Sony is looking to achieve is to get the best of both worlds. They want to get a player that is not only going to buy their single player games and buy their big AAA titles, but they want to get that player that's also going to download their free live service games. So when they're done playing the single player titles, now you're playing Twisted Metal Online. Now you're playing The Last of Us online. Now you're playing Ghost of Tsushima online. Now you're playing Horizon, whatever it might be, whatever your flavor is, whatever. This is why Sony's developing 12 live service games. Dude, they want there to be something for everyone. And not all of them will succeed, but you better believe that Sony's goal is to have that as their reality. And even going beyond live service, Sony wants to try to make sure that these live service games, and this is where things are going to get interesting. Speaking about the Guerrilla developed Horizon model, or I just read the Vegas model, Horizon game, the multiplayer game. Based off of our understanding, they're going for a different visual style with this game. And I'm telling you, that is absolute confirmation that this different visual style for this Horizon multiplayer game, it's going to be, I don't want to say it's going to be like Fortnite, but it's going to have a bit of a pop to it. If you want to, I think that's putting it lightly. I don't want to shit on it because we haven't seen it yet. It's going to look different. And I think it's going to try to be a little bit more broadly appealing. And I think what we're going to see is when they announce this Horizon multiplayer game, it's going to be a PS5 game. You can play it on PC day and date. That was confirmed from Herman Hulst. It's going to be on mobile too. This is what you see. What do you see with the most popular live service games out there? The most popular live service games you can pretty much play almost anywhere. Almost anywhere. I don't think Sony's going to put it on Xbox, but who knows? I know that sounds absolutely insane to people, but it really depends on how much Sony wants to make their live service games a success. In the same way that Microsoft believes Game Pass is the future of Xbox, Sony believes live service games are the future of PlayStation in terms of sustainable growth. And I think what Sony might want to do with this like Horizon game is they know that a lot of people who are on PlayStation are automatically going to play it, right? It's going to be free to play, very likely free to play. People who played Horizon Zero Dawn, people who played Horizon Forbidden West, most of them who enjoyed those games are at the very least going to try. They're going to try this game out and see if they like it. So they're not worried about the console players. PC players, they're hoping that, maybe there's a lot of people on PC that just simply haven't experienced Horizon, that they haven't ever played this. And if they play this free-to-play live service Horizon game, this will be their first time experiencing it. And then what that might do is at best, it'll make them be like, yo, this Horizon multiplayer game's pretty good. Maybe I'm going to go play Horizon. Now I'm going to go buy Horizon Zero Dawn or Horizon Forbidden West and play that on my PC. And Sony basically just converted a PC player to a PlayStation fan. And that same exact thing is going to happen potentially for anybody on mobile. Now, mobile's a bit different because if they make a native mobile Horizon game, that multiplayer, where it's cross-play, you're playing with people on PS5 and PC, I don't think Sony believes they're going to be able to convert many mobile players to be like, yo, I just played this Horizon multiplayer game on my phone. I'm going to go buy a PS5 now and play Forbidden West. I don't think Sony's expecting that to happen too much. But what it means is that, okay, you're somebody who's not going to buy Horizon Forbidden West. You're not somebody who's ever going to buy these big AAA games for our expensive console. But you know what you are? You are somebody who will maybe buy a couple microtransactions off of us on your phone. And just like that, Sony's getting a piece of the pie that previously they weren't getting any of. And if you're somebody who is a fan of these big budget AAA games, you have to view this as a win and you have to view this as a good thing. The reason being is because the more recurrent revenue that Sony can see, not revenue, profit. Let me stress that. The more recurring profit and sustainable profit that Sony can get month over month, year over year from these live service games, this is what's going to enable them to be able to keep reinvesting in their AAA games and in their studios and in new IP. I think that a lot of people don't fully understand just how risky it is. I see Sony saying, MBG, this is a huge risk. It is, but you know what's an even bigger risk? Sony right now, you know what's an even bigger risk? Sony right now greenlighting a new AAA IP from one of their studios. And when I say AAA, I mean like full-blown $150, $200 million game. That's an even bigger risk because Sony doesn't have any successful live service games. Instead, what they have to do is these games can't afford to fail. I think that's ultimately what I'm trying to say here. These games that Sony produces, they simply cannot afford to fail. And by Sony introducing live service games and games that can bring in sustainable, recurrent, profitable revenue, it will make it so there's a bit more padding. Not a whole lot, but enough to where it's like, okay, look, if our $150 million big budget AAA new single player IP, if it didn't sell as well as we had hoped, maybe it's okay. Maybe it's okay because our live service games are kicking ass. So maybe we can greenlight a sequel. You know what I mean? I don't want to get ahead of myself. The reality is I'm not Jim Ryan, obviously. I don't know exactly what is being said in the boardroom meetings with PlayStation executives, but when I look at the trajectory that PlayStation's going in, to me, the thing that becomes crystal clear is the number one priority for PlayStation is to take what they have established and what they are known for in the PlayStation community and in the core console video game community and blow the doors open and get that out there to everyone and to try to saturate the market. It's why Sony's making so many movies, so many TV shows, and why they're pursuing these live service games. And I think where things get a little bit blurry for us is, well, what does that mean? If Sony succeeds in doing this, what does that mean? Like, what does that mean for PlayStation and the fans that have grown accustomed to things being a certain way? Well, it definitely means things will change, but it doesn't necessarily mean they'll change for the worse. I mean, there's a chance, but I also, before I move on to the next topic, I also want to mention that you also have to consider what happens if Sony doesn't do this. I want to just quickly go over a scenario where what if Sony decided they're not pursuing live service games and they're not copying Game Pass and they're not doing, a similar subscription model and they're not embracing PC and they're not embracing mobile, but instead they're just like, we make a console, we sell you the console, and we make exclusives, and you play the exclusives on the console, and that's our business, right? What would happen to PlayStation in the long run if that's what they chose to do? Well, I think the truth is PlayStation would stagnate. It would. And I say that because if Sony were to choose to do that, the problem is, okay, yes, Sony can exist in their own bubble, but what about the rest of the gaming industry? Is the rest of the gaming industry going to follow Sony and do that? No. The rest of the gaming industry is doing very different things and moving on beyond that model, well beyond it. And I feel like Sony has been fighting, believe it or not. I think Sony and Nintendo, but mainly Sony, because they have a big presence with third-party, partners and publishers. To me, it seems like Sony has been fighting as hard as they could for the longest time to try to prevent that, to basically hold on to this model. And because this is the model that allows them to be in the lead, that allows them to be number one. And as we see with Microsoft threatening a brand new model, the biggest threat to Sony is if Microsoft changes the preferred model, then Sony isn't number one anymore. Microsoft is. So this is basically Sony's way. Sony had to, a couple of years ago, probably around 2018, 2019, 2020, around that time, they basically had to sit down, look at the next generation, and try to map out like where are things headed and what changes might we have to make. And you remember how there was that big internal fight between, at least it seemed there was, between Jim Ryan and Sean Layden? There was a power struggle, and Sean Layden ended up losing, and he got, let's face it, he got kind of kicked out. I think the power struggle, truthfully, was ultimately, I think Jim Ryan looked at the future of gaming and said, we have to go beyond the console. Like, we have to start making changes. Not at the expense of the console, but because the wider industry is doing it. And if we don't, we're going to shrink, or we're not going to be able to keep up. And I think Sean Layden, I think he was maybe the opposite. And he said, no, I think we just have to not change anything. Just do what we do best and we'll be fine. And maybe Sean Layden was right. But it's been like what, 4 years almost since this has happened. And what's interesting about Jim Ryan and Sean Layden is both Jim Ryan and Sean Layden have been with PlayStation since like 1994. Both of them were there from the very start. And it's just fascinating to think that they maybe both had very different views on which direction the video game industry was headed in and where it might go and where PlayStation might have to go to maintain leadership. And I don't know, man. I think it's really too early to tell what Jim Ryan's legacy for PlayStation is going to be. I think that he doesn't have the best reputation. I think that Jim Ryan is actually maybe viewed as kind of like a black sheep of PlayStation executives. And I think the biggest reason for that is because I don't think Jim Ryan is, I feel like every decision he makes is purely like what makes the most business sense. Like, what is best for our business? Not necessarily, and I know that some people might be like, oh, well, that's anti-consumer. Yeah, I mean, the problem with that business first mentality is there will be times where it may seem like they don't care about, the customer or giving the customer a good deal or anything like that. But I don't think it's that extreme. Like, I think Jim Ryan's well aware that like you got to keep the customers happy. But I also feel like Jim Ryan is somebody that is maybe like when it comes to running the PR department and when it comes to running Sony and PlayStation, if you look at the way dude, how many negative headlines have you seen for when it comes to Jim Ryan, PlayStation, Sony since the PS5 launched? How many have you seen? While you're answering that, I'm going to Ex Cathedra, you're saying Merry Christmas to all of you. Rock on, MBG. Well, thanks, man. Merry Christmas to you too. Appreciate the support, bud. And then we have Salmark saying Kojima's studio isn't justified by only 2 games. Well, we'll have to see, man. They might have more in the works that we don't know about yet. We'll have to see. What I was saying though about the amount of negative headlines that we've seen, since Jim Ryan took over, more than we've seen probably in almost like the whole PS4 generation. But isn't it strange to think? Think about this for a moment. Isn't it just so fascinating that we can see all of these negative headlines? We can watch Sony make, as many people on the internet want to tell you, huge mistakes. And they're messing up and they're anti-consumer and they hate their customers and they don't care about anybody. And yet, what happens when God of War Ragnarok drops? Not only is the PS5 the best-selling console, at least in the United States in November, but basically it's just selling millions upon millions of units continually. Like, it's, clearly there's no slowdown, but God of War is also the best-selling first-party game ever for Sony within 5 days. Now, if you're Jim Ryan, you know what you're probably thinking to yourself. If you're anybody at Sony, for that matter, what you're probably thinking to yourself is, my God, really good thing we didn't listen to anybody on the internet in those echo chambers that were trying really hard to make it seem like we're making poor decisions, that we don't like. This is where I get so frustrated, and people think that they know how to run Sony better than Sony, that they know how to run the PlayStation business better than the people who are running the PlayStation business. Keywords here: while Sony is continuing to break records and achieve success. Not to say that Sony hasn't come down off of some maybe unnatural success due to COVID in 2020. You know, we see like PS Plus dropping a little bit. We see some of the profits dropping a little bit, but that's not because Sony's screwing up or making big mistakes. It's just the nature of it's the nature of making AAA games. It's the nature of selling a console, and it's the nature of coming off of COVID, COVID in the pandemic and everything that happened there. And I'm not trying to make this like I'm here to I'm Jim Ryan defender number one. Sony it's not so much that, it's just like, to me, I've always said the proof is in the pudding. You know what I mean? And I feel like everybody can talk about the ingredients that might be in it. Everybody can talk about how it might turn out. Everybody can write the headlines, just going with the pudding analogy here, that Sony's screwing up the pudding. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing anymore. They're messing it up. It's all going downhill. And then, I've seen a lot of PlayStation fans come out and be like, just calm down. They know what they're doing. It's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And when it's all said and done, like, yeah. I mean, they put out their games. Their games are amazing. People love the games. The console's still great. I mean, dude, the amount of fear mongering I saw with the PS5, it was insane. The amount of people are like, dude, if you buy a PS5, this was before it launched, obviously, and their whole T-flop conversation and whatever, oh my God, Sony's screwing up with that SSD, bro. Sony's screwing up with that SSD. Oh my God, Sony wants me to install my own SSD expansion if I wanted more storage. What are they, crazy? Oh man, I'm just saying, it's like, you look back the past 2 years, you could just see a whole litany of things that so many people were just so wrong about all of it. And you still see it happening today, right? You still see it happening today with a lot of the things that Sony's doing and a lot of the things that PlayStation's doing. And it's like, it would be easy for, I think, somebody to point the finger at PlayStation and say, dude, Jim Ryan sucks because he didn't do a showcase this year. Sony sucks because they didn't announce any new first party games, no showcase. But it's like, okay, all right, I get it. That's a quick, knee jerk reaction. But hold on a second. Could it maybe be, for just a moment, that there's a reason for that? As crazy as that sounds, maybe there's a reason Sony didn't do a showcase, and maybe they have something planned out beyond this year and this year's showcase. Maybe I don't know. Hold on. Maybe they know what they're doing. It's like the whole thing with Activision Blizzard. People just dumping, completely dumping on Jim Ryan, on Sony, for not complying with Microsoft's demands, basically. People just ripping Sony to shreds because Sony's like, we're not doing Game Pass. That's not our model. We're not signing Microsoft's deal. We're not just going to say A-OK to them buying a publisher like Activision Blizzard. And people want to tear Sony up for this. And the amount of people that have just been fucking, and excuse my language here, but just totally fucking wrong about what they really thought was going to happen. Remember how just a couple months ago, oh yeah, dude, this deal's going to go through, no problem. Sony's going to look like an idiot. Sony's going to, everybody's going to be mad at Sony. Sony doesn't know what they're talking about. They sound like hypocrites. They don't know what they're doing. They're just scared. And this deal is going to go through. Nothing can stop Microsoft. No problem. And look at where we are now. The amount of people are like, oh, the FTC will never sue. The FTC will never sue Microsoft. Sony has no power here. They're not influencing anything. And it's like, yeah, people making fun of Jim, like crying Jim. It's like interesting how the tables have turned here, because it seems like the ones who are doing the crying now are Phil Spencer and Microsoft's president, Brad Smith. Those are the two who are crying the loudest right now. And I'll tell you what, I haven't heard a thing from Jim Ryan. The only thing I recall Jim Ryan realistically saying, as well as all of Sony, is that, yeah, we think that this could hurt the industry, and we think that this could hurt us, and we just think that this is going to be all around bad, and we don't trust Microsoft. That, like, if you whittle it down, that's pretty much what Sony said. And now what Microsoft's saying is, well, of course Sony's going to say that because they're the leader. They're better. You're saying MBG defending Sony with his life, the usual. Well, it's just because it's like, it's not so much that I'm trying to defend Sony, and I'm not sitting here saying like, you guys better like Sony. You better not talk bad about Jim Ryan. It's not like that. It's just more like things move at such a rapid pace these days that I don't think people take a moment to realize like how much has actually been correct now that things have played out versus how much was just, abhorrently wrong. And I've flip-flopped, admittedly so, with this whole Activision Blizzard thing, mainly due to ignorance, to just lack of understanding of like what exactly is going on here. Like, why is Sony saying this? Why is Microsoft saying this? Like, I've never witnessed anything like this, because I don't really follow like things like this that happen in other industries, like mega, acquisitions. I feel like this is the first time we've really seen something like this massive kind of happen in the gaming industry. And I think it's interesting to think that, what we're seeing now is we have Microsoft's president, Brad Smith. He came out and he's like, Sony has like 296 exclusive games. Compared to Xbox, we only have like 59 exclusives. All right. This is, you're saying Brad Smith is a boomer. Dude, he definitely is, man. Like, you could tell this guy is not all with it when it comes to the stuff he's saying and talking about in the gaming industry. And I get, it's like, okay, maybe you're pulling out some statistics here. 296 Sony exclusives, 59 Xbox exclusives. Yeah, on paper, that looks real bad. You're saying, how is Brad Smith wrong? Well, where Brad Smith is wrong, in my opinion, is when he then goes on to say, and I think that the judge basically saying, like, when they take it to court against the FTC, the judge is going to have to decide if it's really that detrimental to the industry and anti-competitive if we just go from 59 to 60. Like, bro, there's no way you are actually trying to claim that after you secure Activision Blizzard, Microsoft, their little needle is going to move from 59 exclusives to 60 exclusives. Like, what? There's no way, dude. There's no way. And the thing that I really don't like about the position that Microsoft is taking at this point, including Phil Spencer, is they're trying to use Sony's success against them in a really disingenuous way. Now, I understand why they're doing it. Just like I said previously, I understand why Sony maybe is saying some things that can make them look a little bit more hypocritical, that can make them seem like the bad guys or like they're ridiculous for saying what they're saying. I understand why Microsoft is saying it here too, because these corporations are going to do what they have to do. They're going to say what they have to do. But to me, what Microsoft is doing right now highlights the exact problem. It highlights the exact reason why they should not be allowed to get Activision Blizzard. And it's simply because if they have the audacity to sit here and condemn Sony and basically say, Sony basically beat us And they did so mostly fair and square by just growing their studios, growing talent, making better games than us, right? Doing all these things and securing some exclusives as well from second and third party, which Microsoft has also done many times in the past. I would like people to go back to the original Xbox One. Do you remember how many exclusive games Xbox had to secure for the original Xbox? What about the 360, right? And even the Xbox One. It's like, Microsoft is basically saying, um, you know, they're better than us and they beat us. And so it's not fair. So we should just be allowed to buy these dudes so then we can try to actually beat them. It's the most ridiculous nonsense I've seen. And it's like, you see, that's the difference. That is the difference between Sony and Microsoft. Sony isn't the one that lost. And do you know why they didn't lose? Because they did things the right way. They grew their studios. They nurtured them. They brought them to where they needed to be, to where now they produce some of the best games in the industry. Right? It's not Sony's fault that because they became so successful in the console market, certain publishers, right? Certain video game publishers and certain developers are like, you know what? We don't want to make an Xbox version. We just want to make a PlayStation version. How is that Sony's fault? You're saying he's pulling the organic card? No, not necessarily. No, I mean, dude, look, man, I know you can make fun of it all you want, but you cannot deny that there's a massive difference between Sony buying Sucker Punch in 2011 after making like an infamous game and Sony buying Naughty Dog back in like 2001 after Crash Bandicoot or something like that. You can't sit here and actually say that that is even remotely equivalent to any of the things that Microsoft is doing today. It's not. I see, Chris, you're saying there is no right or wrong way to be successful, simply what is effective. I mean, from a robotic, purely objective standpoint, I guess I could agree with that. Yeah, I get that. And I understand that in business, it really isn't so much about what's right or wrong, but I feel like it's a little bit disingenuous, again, like to just kind of basically say, well, sorry, Sony, you grew your studios after all these years. You really did everything you could to be the leader in this market, but too bad, you got a competitor here that's worth a couple $1 trillion and they're just going to buy whoever they want and you can't do anything about it. I mean, yeah, you can say, hey man, that's the name of the game. That's business. And you're right. You're right. Like that is business. That is how it goes. But at the same time, it's like, surely on just even a human level, like you got to be able to see that there's a difference here, and you like, if I guess what I mean to say is like, if you were Sony, would you really not try to fight this? Even just because you really think like this is some bullshit. Like this is some straight up bullshit, I don't know. I guess I'm just trying to say, like, I can't blame Sony in this scenario, and I do not trust Microsoft. I do not trust Microsoft at all. I don't understand why people continue to fall for Microsoft's ridiculous PR of like, we're your friend, right? We're your friend. Like we just, all we care about is saving you money. Like, just no. That's not what it comes down to in the end. You don't become a $2 trillion company by by just constantly, by only focusing on giving people the best possible deal. It doesn't work like that. It's not possible. Actually, if you think about it, sometimes maybe the only way a company can really be that successful is by being the only company that can give you any deal, if you think about it. Blue Streak 320, you're saying Phil saying PlayStation grows by making Xbox smaller reminds me of Patrick saying SpongeBob wants him to starve after eating all the chocolate. I know exactly what you're talking about. And that is some funny shit, dude. That is actually really funny. That's exactly what it comes off as, doesn't it? It's just it frustrates me that it's like, look, I I remember, guys, let's go back. Does anybody remember what a lot of Xbox fans were calling out for back in 2017 and 2018 and 2016 even? I remember so many Xbox fans were like crying for, I was one of them, for crying out for Microsoft to just like, can you just like not suck so much? Like, not even trying to be rude, but it's like, can you just get it together? Just make some good games. You know, you've had years. Yes, the Xbox One got off to a horrifically bad start, but you have new leadership. You know, in 2018, you bought 5 studios. Like, let's make some good games now. And it went from that to, then the focus went from, okay, maybe instead of good and better games, maybe now it's better deal, Game Pass. And I don't know. I know I deviate. I go into many different directions when I begin to talk about this stuff. But essentially, what I'm trying to say here is Phil Spencer is not technically wrong when he says Sony grows PlayStation by making Xbox smaller. It's like, what is it supposed to be? You know what I mean? Like, well, like, how else is it supposed to work? Is it supposed to be that PlayStation grows by also letting Microsoft? I don't get it. You know what I mean? I don't understand what the response is supposed to be. Like, yes, Phil, you're right. That is what Sony has done, and that's also what you tried to do in pretty much every market that you've been in, that Microsoft has been in. You know, like, Microsoft as a company has only grown by making other companies smaller. So I just think ultimately what we're seeing here is we're seeing Microsoft enter desperation mode where they can only hide their hand for so long. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's why it's kind of coming a bit undone, where, you know, Microsoft has tried for so long and they've done so successfully to be like the good guy, and you know, there's nothing I don't want to say devious, because it's like it is business, but there's nothing at all devious about what they might be trying to pull off here, right? Like, they only want, it's like when they say, oh, hey, like, nothing's going to change. Like, if we buy Activision Blizzard, you still have Call of Duty. We're just bringing more games to more people. Like, no, you're not. What are you talking about? Because if you get Activision Blizzard and you claim nothing changes, then why? Why do you need them? No, something does change. You get a lot more money, and you get a lot more control, and you get ownership. Like, I don't understand this. It's just crazy to me, man. It's just absolutely absurd that Microsoft's argument is basically Sony should sign this deal. Sony should sign this deal because you know, we're just trying to bring more games to more people. Like, dude, you're crazy. You're crazy if you think for a second that, like, Sony is just going to be like, yeah, definitely. That's what you want to do, and we want to enable you to do that. It's just crazy, dude. I can't believe the things that some of these executives are saying. I can't believe it. I guess I can. PS Previewer 100, thank you, man, for becoming a member. I appreciate that, buddy. Welcome aboard. Hope you're I hope all my members are, you know, I just want to make it known that anybody who's becoming a channel member, you guys are doing so because you're supporting me directly. You appreciate my content. So I really appreciate that, man. Appreciate all my members. Appreciate all my super chats. Appreciate everybody who's here supporting what I do. Thank you. Um, okay, Kapapa, you're saying the problem with Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard is that one company gets too much power on what content is made. See what happened to Star Wars after Disney. Yeah, that's a problem too. That's why I'm saying like I don't like the consolidation in the gaming industry. I don't. Like I really don't like it because it to me it seems unnecessary, man. It's I don't like Sony doesn't need to own all these entities. Microsoft doesn't need to own all these entities. Nintendo doesn't. The more independent publishers we have, the more independent developers we have, the better. That doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with an acquisition here, an acquisition there. And I understand that maybe to a lot of people, this isn't a conversation of right and wrong, but you do have to kind of look at, well, what does it lead to? Like, what does further consolidation ultimately lead to? And at the end of the day, more often than not, what we've witnessed, what we've seen is it can lead to pretty negative ramifications overall across the board. You know, and I don't like less creativity, less risk, less this, less that, and just more of one thing, and that sucks, dude. But you could also argue that that's already what we've been seeing from Activision. And the greatest irony in all of this for me personally is, dude, I don't give a shit about Activision, man. Like, I really don't. Like, at this point, I really don't care. I just really don't care. You know, like, they showed off that new Crash Bandicoot game, and I'm like, okay. I didn't think that's where they were going with that franchise. They canceled a Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 and 4 remaster after the amazing Tony Hawk Pro Skater 1 and 2 remaster. They just straight up canceled it. They ran what was once an awesome, maybe it was a fad, but it was an awesome series, Guitar Hero, into the ground completely, right? I don't know. And then Blizzard, I guess maybe Blizzard will continue to succeed in some areas and others they'll struggle. But, you know, Activision is just Call of Duty, man. Like, that's what it is. And I'm over that at this point. Space D, you're saying problem with that argument is that PlayStation exclusive games only account for less than 20% of their success. The rest is purely thanks to third-party exclusive content on games like COD, FIFA, Fortnite, etc. Yeah, I mean, I won't deny that that plays a big part in the appeal of PlayStation, and that is one area of PlayStation that I'm torn with, because it's like I don't really care about how many people are buying PlayStation to play Fortnite, to play FIFA, to play Call of Duty. I don't care about that. As a PlayStation fan, I do not care. But then again, I also think to myself, well, realistically speaking, I know not everybody who buys a PlayStation console is doing so for the same reason I am. I know that not everybody who's going to buy a PlayStation or even interact with the PlayStation brand is to play Ghost of Tsushima, is to play God of War. You know what I mean? There are plenty of people who interact with this brand in this marketplace, the PlayStation marketplace, and they don't even pay any attention to these games. They just play these bigger, more casual, streamlined games. And so I understand why that's important to the health of PlayStation, just like it is for Xbox, just like it is for any other platform. And I guess I'm not saying like I would prefer PlayStation to lose these things, because I don't think that helps either. Like, I don't think it's going to help the PlayStation platform to lose any games, even if it's years and years and years from now. But I also simply can't blame Sony for not trusting Microsoft. That's all. Like, that's, if you think about it, that's kind of all this boils down to, is I can't blame Sony for not trusting Microsoft. I can't blame Sony for not doing what Nintendo did, for not doing what Valve did. And I think in the end, though, I want to point this out, and you guys tell me what you think of this. I think in the end, what could happen, or what we're seeing right now, is Sony's not going to budge. Sony's sitting back at this point, I think, on the sidelines with their popcorn, or maybe nervously biting their nails, or both. And they're going to watch to see what happens between Microsoft and the FTC. Because I've seen people say that the FTC is going to demolish Microsoft. Or no. Microsoft is going to demolish the FTC in the court because Microsoft has an extremely strong case. The FTC has a very weak case. And I've also heard that, people ask the question, if the FTC is entering what they already know is a losing battle against Microsoft, then why are they suing them in the first place? Well, from what I've heard, the FTC is basically trying to send a message. And the message that they're trying to send is that if you're a big tech company, the FTC will make life hard for you. Because even if Microsoft wins, which it seems like they will, nobody knows, but based off of what I've heard, it sounds like Microsoft, if they go through with this and they take it all the way, they will win this in the end. They will. And what that will mean for Microsoft is they can just now proceed forward with the acquisition with nobody getting in their way. But the problem for Microsoft that the FTC is creating is, well, now Microsoft is going to have to spend a lot more resources, a lot more money, and a lot more time on this acquisition than they originally planned to. And it's almost like the FTC is hoping that this is going to give Microsoft such a headache and, create such a problem for them that Microsoft's just going to throw their hands up there and say, you know what? Fuck it. This isn't worth it. Like, this just isn't worth it anymore. The deal it's not worth it anymore. Now, right now, at this moment in time, there are people who will tell you that they are positive Microsoft will go through with this, that they are positive Microsoft will take the FTC to court. They will beat them in court, and they will go through by 2024, 2025. They'll get this to go through after beating the FTC in court. There are people who will tell you they are positive Microsoft will not go through with it. That right now, Microsoft is just putting on a brave face and basically making it seem like they're willing, they're going to go, they're ready. They got their shotgun locked and loaded. They're ready to go to war. But in reality, when the time comes, they're like, you called our bluff. We're not doing this. Like, we're not, this isn't worth it. Like, this just isn't worth it. We're putting it down. And the FTC, if the FTC wins, it seems like it's not going to be in the court. If the FTC wins in the end, it's going to be because they basically made life hell for Microsoft. And Microsoft was like, we'll focus on something else at this point, and they just end up making Microsoft feel like it isn't worth it. So where does Sony stand in all of this? Well, at this point, I think Sony got what they wanted, and that is, the CMA is still, and it's worth noting the CMA and the European regulator, they're still investigating, and we don't know what they're going to do yet. That's worth noting. Like, the FTC is just one component here. We don't know what's going to happen with the CMA. We don't know what's going to happen with the European regulator. So they could make life even harder for Microsoft depending on what they want to do next. And you're saying Activision might sue Sony for costing them. Yeah, dude. Right now, I think the people, you want to talk about people who are literally punching holes through their walls right now because of Sony, it's Activision shareholders. Activision, the board. The board of Activision is ripping their hair out right now because of Sony and because of the FTC and they're they have the most to lose. And so where Sony stands in all of this, based off of my understanding, is they're kind of sitting on the sidelines now, watching and waiting. And I think it'll be taken up to the 11th hour. If Microsoft doesn't back down from this and they do go to court, it's going to be, and apparently it's not happening till August of next year, which is crazy. This thing's going to go on for years, which is another reason why Microsoft might just deem it not worth it at that point. It's going to go on for years. And I think in the end, what might happen with Sony is if Microsoft really does take it all the way and they reach the 11th hour where it's like, this is about to end and it's clear Microsoft is going to get it, Sony's going to come in and be like, okay, Microsoft, we'll sign your deal. Like, Sony's only going to do it if they know that it's over and there's zero chance that that this deal could stop. Right now, there's a decent chance this could stop. And Sony is right where they hoped they would be, which is holy shit. Like this might not go through in the end. Like it might not go through in the end. And that's a far cry from where we started, where a lot of people were like, "Oh, yep." And even the way Microsoft talked about it. You remember when they announced it? Do you remember the way Microsoft announced it? They put the whole infographic up or the picture of Xbox and all the Activision games, and they present it in a way that makes it seem to people like it's already done. Like, yeah, this is that we got these guys, but it couldn't be further from that at this point. Nobody has anything, and you know, right now the ball is up in the air and it's in play, and we're gonna have to see, man. Like it's either gonna. I don't think there's anything else Sony can do at this point. I think Sony is willing to work still with any regulator and with anybody who is able to help them out. But right now, I think Sony is just where we are, where we just have to watch and see what happens. But you better believe, if I'm not sure if you guys have noticed the change in Microsoft's tune. Have you noticed how Microsoft went from, seemingly, coming off as pretty, I don't want to say confident, but yeah, I mean, they kind of came off confident, but they were really kind of pushing hard with the, Sony Sony's the only one getting in our way, and we're just trying to, like, basically they were coming off as, okay, we'll give you a 10-year deal now, Sony. Is that better than 3? How's 10 years? And we'll even let you put it on PS Plus. Does that sound good too? We'll do what you want. We'll do what you want. And basically, once it became clear to Microsoft that the FTC is like, we don't care what you do. We don't care about your concessions. We're suing you. We're suing you. Like once it just became clear that like did you guys hear the quote from Microsoft's president Brad Smith? I thought it was the funniest shit ever, where he's like, we tried to give peace a chance. I'm like, yo, this is kind of getting entertaining. Like this man literally said they tried to give peace a chance. And it's just like, now you can see the gloves are off for Microsoft and they're not playing nice guy anymore. And I'm going to tell you now, if there's one thing that I think Microsoft actually really has, they can lose here, like even if they get Activision in the end, if there's one thing that I think Microsoft may really end up losing by the end of this, if they really don't care anymore about public perception, because now they just have to try to, they got to try to push to get this through. They could potentially ruin their what they've worked so hard to create, which is this nice guy, good company that cares about the customer image. It's clear that the FTC is not buying that. And now Microsoft is going to be forced to find other ways to talk about this. And we're already seeing them slip up a little bit with the stuff that like Brad Smith is saying, where it's like, dude, if you're an Xbox fan, there's no way you can be listening to this guy and be thinking like, yeah, like that's definitely true, right? Like you're listening to them and it's like, yeah, I don't get it, man. I don't get how people don't clearly see that Microsoft, their intention is not to compete. Like I really couldn't. It couldn't be more clear that Microsoft is not trying to compete. They're trying to create a new game where they are I don't want to say they're the only player, but realistically speaking, they're the only viable player. That's what they're doing. And the FTC acknowledges that. There are other companies that have stuff to gain from this. And it's going to be fascinating because you're going to start to see more third parties get involved. But yeah, I'm gonna move on from this topic in just a minute. But this is it's just so fascinating to me, and it's so kind of ridiculous as well. Like I just want to end it by saying Microsoft right now is trying to play the underdog. And I want to make it clear that what we are witnessing now and what we are about to witness be ramped up even further. If Microsoft is actually going through with this and they're ready to go to court to fight for this, we are witnessing a multi-trillion-dollar company attempt to play the underdog, attempt to play the weakling, attempt to play the small, irrelevant, fragile, almost like indie company here that's trying their best to just survive. When in reality, I think that anybody with, who has a couple brain cells to rub together can clearly see that, no, it's not just let us compete. You've been competing. You've been competing with Sony and Nintendo. You've just been competing poorly. And that's nobody's fault but Microsoft's. And that's why more than anything that quote from Phil Spencer where PlayStation they want to grow by making Xbox smaller, like you're really going to try to blame PlayStation for your failings, for your shortcomings? You're going to try to blame the fact that Naughty Dog made The Last of Us as a reason. Like that's basically what you're doing. You're blaming games like The Last of Us. You're blaming games like Spider-Man and what Insomniac did for that game, and the fact that Sony was wise enough to see that Insomniac is a great partner. We should keep working with them and maybe even purchase them, and lock them down. You see that like Microsoft could have bought Insomniac. They could have. Nothing was stopping them. Literally nothing. Microsoft could have taken, think about this for a second. That $68 billion that Microsoft is dumping into Activision to compete, Microsoft could have taken a fraction of that money. $2 billion. $2 billion out of that 68. Put that into third-party investment, into third-party deals, second-party investment, and boom, I promise you, you will increase the amount of exclusivity you have for your brand that you're trying to compete with. You probably double it with $2 billion. You could probably triple it, quadruple it with $2 billion. But no, Microsoft decided we're not going to do that to compete. We're just going to buy Activision. And we're going to be seen as the good guys for buying Activision while we point the finger at Sony for being the bad guys for investing money into some third-party and second-party deals. That's where we are right now. And that's why I hope this whole fucking thing, I hope this blows up in Microsoft's face so bad. I really do. Because what I said about Microsoft years ago is still true to this day. And I know that there are going to be Xbox fans who don't want to hear this. There are going to be people who deny it. And I know that a lot of people are going to come out and they're going to be like, but what about Pentiment? What about High on Life? What about Starfield? Not saying Xbox doesn't do anything right or anything good, but the biggest problem that Microsoft has always faced, and the reason why they drove somebody like me away from the platform, is because they don't fucking know what they're doing when it comes to game development. They don't know what they're doing. They never really have. And anytime they got close to maybe figuring it out, they would make some kind of ridiculous, dumb decision that just undid anything that they were building towards. This is what Microsoft has done for years. And that's why I'm going to call Phil Spencer out and I'm going to call Brad Smith out on their comments, because they are failing to take accountability and responsibility for their shortcomings, for their poor management, and for their inability to compete. That's not Sony's fault. That's not Nintendo's fault. That's not Valve's fault. That's Microsoft's fault. That's all it comes down to. So, Starfield will probably be a big hit for Microsoft. I'm not going to sit here and say that that's not a Microsoft game because I understand. I understand that if I say that, people will say, well, you can't say Spider-Man is Sony's game. I'm not going to play that game. I literally just suggested that Microsoft secure more third-party and second-party games rather than buying a publisher. So I'm not going to play that game and say Starfield isn't Microsoft's game. But what I can say, factually speaking, what I can say is that it's not an Xbox Game Studios title. Microsoft is not the one. Microsoft developers and Microsoft talent, they're not the ones responsible for Starfield. That's Bethesda and their talent that Microsoft acquired. And that's fine. We can call it Xbox game. If it wins Game of the Year, that'll be an Xbox Game of the Year win. But when it comes down to it, that's just the fact. And if you want to make the same argument about some Sony games, you're probably right. You're probably right in some cases. Like Final Fantasy 16, that's not a Sony game. Sony is not the reason for Final Fantasy 16's greatness. Sony's the reason for its exclusivity, but not its development, as far as we know. So, anyway, I know I really kind of went in deep there with this one, but it's something. It's gonna get worse, I think, before it gets better, and I think that's the truth, especially now that the FTC is suing, and I think it's gonna be a topic that's impossible to avoid, going forward, unfortunately. And very last thing I'll say, I promise. I'm not going to go on long here, but all I want to present at this point is what would happen? What would it look like? What would the conversation turn into if Microsoft did decide to drop this? If Microsoft did ultimately decide, you know what, this isn't worth going through with anymore, and we're just ending it, and they're not going to face the FTC in court, and Activision is, I think they're gonna owe Activision like a bunch of money, like $3 billion or something like that, which is insane. I just wonder, like, what would Microsoft's plan be at that point? And I would be interested to kind of see, because surely they have a backup plan, or they've thought about what they might do if this doesn't go through. And I'm just curious. Hoping, dude, Capono keeps saying in the chat, hoping that Activision ends up suing Sony. It is interesting to think. I will say, too, that if this does end up falling through, and by the end of all this, Microsoft doesn't get Activision and Activision remains independent, oh my God. I would love to know what the conversation between Sony and Activision at that point is going to be like. Because Activision is like, they would, I don't, you say the bridge would be burned. I mean, I feel like it's really hard to say that because this is business we're talking about, but I think maybe until there's new leadership at Activision, I could see the bridge being burned. I could see it being burned. So, we'll see what happens, guys. We'll see what happens. I just can't stand to see some of these comments that are being made. Not because of the comments themselves, but because of the way it ends up influencing some of the people who pay attention to this stuff. And I hope people can kind of understand and see through some of it. And that goes for Sony as well. Sewell, you're saying happy 35th anniversary to all Final Fantasy fans out there, and cheers to our Sprout MVG over here. That's funny. Sewell is referring to me as a Sprout because I'm still a newcomer to Final Fantasy. Yeah, speaking of Final Fantasy, I saw that there's the 1 through 6 Pixel collection, I think, remaster collection that was announced. I think a lot of people are happy about that. Is it confirmed, though? I saw that apparently it's not going to Xbox, and this is one of those situations where I think we're just seeing Square Enix decide that I don't think Sony paid for that exclusivity. I think Square Enix just decided to only do Switch and PlayStation, which is interesting. Um, yeah, I can't say that I'm going to be playing those, but yeah, that last Final Fantasy 16 trailer we got looked amazing. I got to say that the combat in FF16 is looking top tier, and I can't wait. I can't wait to play it. Forspoken though, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be passing on Forspoken. I'm not feeling it. I'm just not feeling it. And you know what's interesting? I heard that apparently the development team who is made Forspoken, they're the ones who made Final Fantasy 15, which is fascinating to me. I never played Final Fantasy 15. Yeah, so thank you for that, Sewell. And yeah, happy 35th anniversary to Final Fantasy. That is man, that's crazy to think. Like, I guess I just didn't realize how long Final Fantasy has been around. 35 years. That's a really long time in the gaming industry. The gaming industry is not that old. Final Fantasy is yeah. Huh. Where's the time go? Yeah, I see Jack in the chat saying, and Dead Rising 3 is still an Xbox exclusive. You know, I gotta say, Dead Rising 3 was one of the better games I played on Xbox. I enjoyed that game. Dead Rising 3 was fun. Kevin, you're saying just happy that it's in Bobby, or that it's salt in Bobby Kodak's wound. Yeah, that's what's so weird about all of this is you hear about all the reports regarding Activision and Bobby Kotick, and you know I was kind of arguing with some people on Twitter briefly where, like, you know, I put out a tweet, not to keep going on about it, but I put out this tweet where I basically said, like, you know, I find it strange that Microsoft is making this argument that even though they bought 5 studios in 2018 to add to their 7 studios, and then after that they bought all of ZeniMax and Bethesda, I find it really strange that they're still they're going on to make the argument that they also need Activision Blizzard on top of all of that just to compete. And that's basically what I said. Like, I just think it's crazy that they're actually trying to make that argument, that basically having all of Bethesda and having, like, you know, double digit internal studios, 5 of which you just bought, like, that's not enough to compete, I think is absurd. And there were people that were like coming at me, you're like, dude, it's not Microsoft's fault. Activision wanted to be bought. They want it to be bought. And I'm like, yeah, they want it to be bought because they also kind of failed. I mean, Activision itself, I'm sure they would be fine in the end, but it's like, it's because of their poor, like, Activision's poor management and just terrible, just terrible things, that practices and the things that they would do internally, and the fact that they put all their all their eggs in the Call of Duty basket. It's like, I don't know, man. I don't know. Bobby, I'm not talking. I said Bobby Kotick. Bobby Kotick. Bobby Kotick trying to buy his way out. Yeah. Saying, how did they fail to make bank? I'm not saying that they failed to make bank. I'm just saying that there's a reason they want it to be sold, or bought, I should say. There's a reason why. And I don't know. You know, there is like an argument to be made that, like, could Activision Blizzard improve underneath Microsoft? I don't know about that. We'll have to see what ends up happening with Bethesda, I think, first. Lewis, member for 10 months, you're saying, I'm liking Crisis Core. It looks and plays just like Final Fantasy VII Remake. It's a prequel to Final Fantasy VII. You know what's interesting is some Final Fantasy fans were telling me not to play Crisis Core, to just wait for Rebirth. I don't know if I'm going to play Crisis Core. I may. I'm up in the air with it right now. Yeah, that's what some people were saying. I don't know why. They were making it sound like it would spoil certain things for me, potentially, which is weird, because I'm like, how? I mean, why would they release it if it could spoil things for their next game? You guys are saying I need to play Crisis Core before Rebirth? Okay. So you're saying with the Zack stuff. So yeah, well, yeah, I mean, the thing, it's enticing to me what Lewis is saying here. He's saying that it plays just like Final Fantasy VII Remake. That's what I was a little bit nervous about with it, where I'm like, is it going to feel way too different? Because that was my favorite part, one of my favorite parts about Final Fantasy VII Remake was the combat. So, if that's true, I may have to pick that up. All right. Sir Speaks a Lot. Thank you, man. You're saying, so I was trophy hunting Returnal, and I have one collectible left for the platinum. It was the red cipher text. It was right in front of me, and there was a power outage, so I couldn't get it. GG. My God, man. I feel that pain. Sir Speaks a Lot. Like, really, I feel that pain. I do, because I told you, like, I loved everything about Returnal except the way they handled the RNG collectibles. I was finished with Returnal after about 40 hours. I ended up putting, I kid you not, 100 hours into Returnal because of those collectibles. And by the time I got to like the 90th hour, I was like, I hate this game. I hate this game. I want to stop. But I couldn't stop because I'm like, I just need one more. I just need one more. And dude, that's horrible. That's horrible that the fact that you were there and you finally got it, and that's almost hard to believe, but man, that is some bad luck. That is some bad luck. I would punch my screen, bro. All right, I wouldn't punch my screen, but I would uninstall that game and be like, well, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done. And I hope that with whatever Housemark does next, I really hope that they do better with the collectibles, because that RNG collectible stuff, that's not going to do it for me. That's not going to do it for me again. Don't punch your screen. No, I would never punch my screen. That would be. I mean, how angry? How much would your IQ have to be reduced in a fit of rage to actually punch your screen, assuming you have like an expensive TV? You'd have to be pretty pissed off, man. Because there's no world in which you don't regret that afterwards. Jack says, lucky for me, I had no intention of platinuming Returnal. I'm going to be honest. I feel like I would have enjoyed Returnal more ultimately as a complete package if I didn't try to platinum it, because it was the game itself. I don't judge it. It's me. Like, I'm not judging the game. I'm judging me, because it's like, I don't have to go for the platinum. I don't have to get these collectibles. I could just beat the game and play it and call it a day. And so I basically beat myself up for, lessening the experience. But I really would like, I really would like if they, if they would just kind of fix those collectibles up. But we do still have some other topics to talk about that I want to we have some other topics that I want to talk about. We have, I think, actually still quite a few left. I see Shelly, Returnal was robbed for Game of the Year 2021. Come on, It Takes Two over Returnal. I mean, I could agree with that. Yeah, I was very surprised that, at the very least, if I'm not mistaken, wasn't Returnal not even nominated for Game of the Year, which was very surprising to me. That was surprising. All right, let's talk about Blue Point, guys. Blue Point Games teasing their next game. I need to know, did everybody see the Christmas card that Blue Point put out? Okay, I'm gonna see if I can bring it up real quick. Maybe I could just put it here over the screen so we can check it out. Because I didn't want to go to their website. Hold on. New game. Yeah, so Blue Point Games is teasing their next game out, and People, including myself, are going kind of crazy trying to figure out what it is because it feels like they're directly teasing something here. Let's see if I can bring it up here for you guys. 1 second. Yeah, so this is the card that they're putting out. And as you can see, as you can very clearly see, we have to the left here Demon Souls remake, which was their last game. Some people were confused as to why the axe, Kratos' axe, is here. It's because it was confirmed that Blue Point Games did help with the development of God of War Ragnarok. And then over on the right here, we have sword from Shadow of the Colossus. Now, obviously, the big question mark here is the box. What's in the box? Now, for me, when I look at this box, I feel like it could be anything realistically. But what makes it so difficult to decipher is we have to remember that Blue Point Games did confirm their next game is not a remake, it's not a remaster, it is not a new IP. Okay? It's not a new IP, and that's really important to keep in mind because they're saying they're making original content. Now, there were some interesting rumors that began to come out over the past year regarding Blue Point Games, and I'll refresh you on what those rumors were. The first rumor, I believe, is that they are working on 2 games. One game is original content, but they are also working on a remaster of another game. Now, it's worth noting, we have never gotten confirmation. That's still a rumor that may or may not be true. So I've seen some people talking about Blue Point Games as if they are confirmed to be working on 2 games. Never got confirmation. The second rumor we heard is that the 2 games that they're apparently working on are a Bloodborne remaster / remake for PS5 and a sequel to Bloodborne, that being Bloodborne 2. Now, it's worth noting that since we heard that rumor about Blue Point working on Bloodborne, it's worth noting that we have since had From Software insiders come out and say that at least one popular insider, I guess there aren't really that many From Software insiders, but one of the more prominent ones, they came out and they said that they've been digging, they've been asking, they've been trying to get answers, and they, based off of everything they've been told, there's no movement whatsoever with the Bloodborne IP. Nothing. There's nothing going on with Bloodborne. And that's what they've heard. And that's the last we heard. So, maybe it's best not to really go... it's also worth noting, we had another rumor, and this one's important as well. There was another rumor regarding Blue Point that apparently they're working on a Metal Gear... I think it was a Metal Gear Solid 1 remake. Okay? Now, at this point, what I will say is that I look at this box, I think there's something very conspicuous about this box. All right. I think what's conspicuous about it is it doesn't seem to have any design on it. To me, that's worth noting. That's clearly intentional. If you look at every other box next to it that's opened, it has some type of design or pattern on it. This box is simply just a plain old cardboard box. Okay? Even the color. It's not like it's red. It's not blue. It's not green. It's not white. It's like a beige cardboard. Okay? I know it sounds funny, but it's true. Like I'm gonna overanalyze this image. We are talking about boxes right now. It's happening. All right, these are my observations. All right, we the blue box thing is over. We all know what Kojima's working on, so I got to move on to something else now, okay? Um Now some people, maybe people who are not familiar with Metal Gear Solid, maybe you don't understand why I'm fixating so much on the box. Okay? A very popular thing. I think even people who haven't played Metal Gear know, there's always been the cardboard box. It's Snake's, it's what he uses to sneak around. A cardboard box. It's what he's known for, and he hides in it. And I look at this box and I'm like, bro, that is like, it is really hard for me not to immediately think that this has something to do with Metal Gear. It's hard not to. But the second thing that I'm paying attention to here is it's not just the box itself, it's also the way it's wrapped. So bear with me here. Maybe I'm the only one, but I look at this and I'm like, that almost, I know it's a bow at the top, but if you were to, I don't know, let me see if I can I'm going to rotate it. Now, if we look at it upside down, it almost looks like it could be a big red exclamation point. Does it not? Does it not? And that's what I get from this. And as you can clearly see, based off of my observations that clearly only I could come up with here, we are looking at Blue Point Games teasing something Metal Gear Solid related. And that's that. We figured it out. But don't come at me though. Don't come at me. Don't come at me, because you guys can't make it seem like I'm the only one that thinks it's Metal Gear. Always Busier saying Microsoft's been sued nearly each decade since the 90s for monopolies. Also, Activision doesn't care if the FTC wins. Microsoft has to pay them billions regardless. True, yeah, I guess in a way Activision would get something out of it, no matter which way it goes. Yeah, we'll see, man. We are losing a MVG again. Sons of Liberty in the chat. He says, "I see the exclamation point here, dude." See, they know. You're saying the shadows look like they spell something? Oh my god. That's taking it to a level even I didn't think about. I'll go check in a second. Saying you think I'm reaching. Well, I don't know, man. At this point, what else could it be, though? I mean, really, though, when it when it comes to when it comes to what Blue Point could be working on, what else could it be? Rari 2X, you're saying I need a Metal Gear Rising sequel. Raiden is the GOAT. Yeah, it would be interesting to get a sequel to that. Now, here's what's really interesting. The thing that gives me a little bit of pause about this being Metal Gear Solid related is the fact, let me fix this, is the fact that, it's been confirmed that they're not, if this were to be Metal Gear Solid related, it's not a remake. It's original content. Now, that, to me, that's tough, man. That's really tough, because basically what we have to whittle this down to, putting, all my crazy theories aside here, what we have to whittle this down to when it comes to Blue Point Games is we have to ask ourselves, what IP realistically could we see be handed to them that they could make new content for? And I have to admit, Bloodborne does kind of come to mind simply because of their work with Demon Souls. Okay? But I don't know, man. I don't see Sony just giving Blue Point Bloodborne. I don't see that happening. I think Sony would be willing to hold on to Bloodborne and save it for when they can work with From Software properly again. I do. I think that's too big to mess up. It's tough for me to imagine Konami. I could see Konami giving Metal Gear to Blue Point, because clearly Konami, as you see what they're doing with Silent Hill, Konami is willing to give their IPs to other studios. But Metal Gear's a different beast than Silent Hill, not only because of Kojima, but because it's like, I just can't imagine. I find it so difficult to imagine Blue Point basically coming out and being like, we made a new Metal Gear. Here's a new Metal Gear game. Like, I don't see that happening. And that's what makes this so difficult for me to pinpoint, and why I'm going to like pump the brakes on the Metal Gear thing, because we also have to understand that there was a rumor, and it seems like this is what's going to happen, because there's been maybe some evidence that has cropped up more recently, that yes, a Metal Gear Solid 3 remake is in the works, and it's at Virtua Studio. So if Virtua Studio is doing the Metal Gear remake, then clearly I think that takes Blue Point Games, I think it takes them out of the equation. I see somebody saying Siphon Filter. That would be a very random one. I'm trying to think of an IP that they could have been handed around 2020, maybe early 2020, something that would make sense, but something that has to be big. Like that's the thing to me about this next game that's original content from Blue Point, is it has to be something big, because they're a big studio. ACM says Uncharted. That would be an interesting one. Uncharted. Maybe, yeah, we were hearing that Uncharted was getting rebooted, apparently, and it was greenlit. I don't know though. Like, Uncharted. I feel like it's a possibility, but an unlikely one. A much beloved IP is what you're saying they're quoted with. Dustin says Blue Point already worked on MGS in the past. That's true. That is true, yeah. So they do have a history with Konami. They did the port for MGS 2 and 3 and Peace Walker, I believe. Sewell says it's Xenogears because I say so. Yeah, I've seen like a lot of people hope for a Xenogears, but I don't know. I mean, no offense to Xenogears, but I don't know that would be like the type of... Like, I don't think you could come back with Xenogears and be like, we made an original game, an original Xenogears game. Like, this is a new Xenogears game. I just don't, I don't know. Something to me about that doesn't... Yeah, that's Square's IP as well, saying it's bigger than anything else. Is it? Well, yeah, you might be right about that. I'm not too familiar with Xenogears. I see PS Reviewer 100, a new Turok. Yo, that would be the most bizarre plot twist ever. Blue Point is making a new Turok. Final Fantasy IX remake from the NVIDIA leak. Well, again, it's not a remake, man. It's not a remake. Resistance. Let me go find... I want to read their quote. I want to read exactly what they said, because I feel like I might be... Yeah, so IGN reported on September 30th, 2021, which is actually my birthday, says PlayStation officially acquires Blue Point Games. Next game planned to be original, not a remake. Sony Interactive Entertainment has announced yet another studio acquisition, Blue Point Games. Blue Point and PlayStation have worked closely for years. Demon's Souls sold more than 1.1 million copies since release. They spoke to Marco Thrush, the Blue Point president. Blue Point wants to make original games. Demon's Souls was only released last November, and while Blue Point isn't officially announcing its game, Marco Thrush explained that the studio is aiming to work on original content going forward. No exact details about what the original content Bluepoint is working on will be, so it remains unclear if it is a new game or part of an existing IP or something new entirely. Uh, yeah, that is a part of an existing IP or something new entirely. Quote, our next project, we're working on an original content right now. We can't talk about what it is, but that's the next step in the evolution for us. Noting that, end quote, Marco Thrush also takes note that even with remakes like Shadow and Souls, the studio has already partially been creating original content. He explained how really the growth of the studio, both in the literal number and of employees as well as the types of projects, naturally leads them to this next step, especially given the team's pedigree. He says the transition from remasters to remakes was to test ourselves and push ourselves harder for the next step. Noting that the team was about 15 people during production of the original God of War collection. Right now, the team is over 70 employees, and at its peak with Demon Souls was at 95 with some outsourcing. I'm trying to see if they say anything else here about. Yeah, I don't think they gave anything away, man. Yeah, I'm not sure. There's it's anybody's guess at this point. Ah, well, I guess we'll find out. I guess we'll find out. I do think though that this little tease, and this is the final thing I'll say, and we'll move on to the next topic. I think that this final tease here, or this little tease, I should say, from Bluepoint is a clear indication that I think we're going to see their new game announced next year. I think it'll be time because by the time we get to like mid 2023, it'll almost be 3 years since Demon Souls came out. As crazy as that sounds, we'll get pretty close to that point. It'll be like 2.5 years. So I think the timing is right, man. I think we're gonna learn about Blue Point's next project in 2023, and I think that's exactly what they're trying to tease here. And you know, I'm when it comes to anything Metal Gear, man, I will lose it. I will I will lose it because I don't know. I To me, Blue Point being handed Metal Gear in any capacity would be incredible for the simple fact that Blue Point is such a talented studio. They really are. Blue Point is a talented studio, and I don't know, man. Kojima does work pretty closely with Sony. Um, do you guys remember with Death Stranding, the Death Stranding director's cut in 2021? The first trailer that Kojima put out was just the biggest Metal Gear tease and nod. Didn't you guys feel like that was like hinting at something, but like nothing ever came? I guess maybe it was just simply Kojima wanting to nod at Metal Gear, give that little nod to fans. But yeah, I that's the thing that I'm hung up on right now, guys. Final thing I can say about Blue Point games for now is the fact that it's not a remake, it's original content makes it very, very, very difficult to determine what exactly it is. Um Shelly says reasons Blue Point are making Uncharted. They work with Naughty Dog. They worked with Uncharted Nathan Drake remaster. Uncharted is a beloved IP. They can do an original Uncharted spinoff. Yeah, that I will admit. I will admit they're yeah, when you kind of put that stuff together, I'm going to be just totally brutally honest right now. I would be so disappointed if that's what Blue Point Games was working on because it's like oh, well, maybe not. Maybe not. If it's like a new Uncharted game, that will be exciting just because it'll be I mean, I would be somewhat excited because it's like, oh, well, this is clearly going to be different. But I would still be a little bit like, oh, well, Uncharted again. Like no offense to Uncharted, but to me that I don't know. At that point, I begin to wonder like, You're saying MBG Malaysia is making Uncharted 5. We'll see. There's so much we don't know. There's so much we don't know. Sunscream, I want to say this too before we move on. Sunscream says Metal Gear Solid is so short. So you're pointing at the fact that that the original Metal Gear Solid is a pretty short game. It can be beat pretty quick. It's not really up to the standard lengthwise of a full price AAA modern day game. And you know what? That's what gets me thinking. Like, and I've speculated about this before. If Blue Point was to take a game and quote unquote remake it, but part of the remake process was we're gonna add new stuff, like we're gonna expand the game. I mean, that could be viewed as original content, right? I mean, but then again, that's a dangerous game. That's dangerous to think about because I don't know that people would be okay with that. You're saying that's not true at all. Resident Evil 2 is literally like 6 hours. LMAO, what? Yeah, well, yeah, I guess. For me, the idea of Metal Gear Solid 1 remake, I mean, yeah, so many different things would have to be changed pretty dramatically. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Speaking of Metal Gear Solid, I will add this. I'm really curious to see what Konami does next because, we heard rumors and reports for literally years that Konami was planning on making a big comeback with the Silent Hill franchise. And then in October, lo and behold, it actually happened. Not only were there multiple announcements, but Konami had a straight up showcase for Silent Hill. And they announced like 4 or 5 different things. I've seen a lot of people saying like they hope Konami does something similar for the Metal Gear franchise. And here's what's worth noting. And here's what's important, I think, to take note of. All of these reports and rumors, or at least a lot of them that we've heard that were claiming that there's a big comeback for Silent Hill being planned, they said that Konami's planning on doing the same thing with Metal Gear Solid and Castlevania. Metal Gear Showcase 2023. I don't know. Sons of Liberty, we're on the same page right now, bro. Metal Gear Showcase. Let's make it happen. Multiple remasters, a remake. They're going to bring out Kojima. Kojima's making, well, maybe, yeah, I don't think Kojima's going to make any more Metal Gear, but Kojima's going to, help guide the remake. I don't know. Consultation. Hit that like button, guys. Hit that like button for the podcast. Let's see if we can get to 400 likes. Josh, you're saying Merry Christmas to you and your family, my boy. What a banger year we had. I have a feeling next year will be fire as well. Spider-Man 2, The Last of Us Factions, Blue Point. Yeah, man. I know. I know people get sometimes people I think get on my case because they're like, dude, you seem too focused on new game announcements and upcoming games and you don't seem to focus too much on what's out and that's not true. I don't think entirely. I just think that look, 2022 was an awesome year for PlayStation, but I don't think anybody can deny that it wasn't necessarily an awesome year for brand new games, okay? I feel like it's fair to say, dude, Horizon, stellar game, sequel. Ragnarok, stellar game, sequel. Even Spider-Man 2, sequel. It's going to be amazing. Gran Turismo 7. You know what I mean? What I'm really eager to see is kind of and learn about is the newer stuff. That's all. Because we already know we're going to be getting, sequels to big games and whatnot, but not even just new IP, but some old IP coming back. Just I'm hoping that 2023 is a year of some surprises, and I feel like it kind of has to be, and that's really what I'm going to kind of be going into 2023 with the mentality of there are going to be some things we know about, again, Spider-Man 2, Final Fantasy, Forspoken, PSVR 2, but I feel like the table will be set Or they or everything could kind of just be set to where it's like, all right, now we can kind of pull the curtain back and show some new stuff. Yeah, the roadmap. So thank you for that, Josh, and Merry Christmas to you and your family as well, man. Always busy. You're saying present Google present head Drake U3. It's Uncharted. I don't know if I read that right, but we'll see, man. Like I'm curious. I'm really curious to see what ends up happening with Uncharted, simply because I feel like there's many different directions they could go with. But I do feel like with Uncharted, whoever they get to whoever they hand the IP off to, it's going to be a big deal. It's going to be a big deal, and I think people are either going to love it or they're going to hate it. Okay. We are moving on to the next topic, though, and the next topic is probably going to be the last one because my voice is starting to go. But the next topic is a pretty significant one, I think, because Sony is now teasing new PlayStation 5 hardware for 2023. And we've been hearing some rumors about different things that Sony has been working on. And based off of what I can tell and everything I've been following, all the rumors, all the hearsay, it seems that what this new PlayStation 5 hardware is going to be is the new PS5, what we could call slim. I don't think Sony's going to call it a slim. Like, they might, who knows, but I think they'll just still call it the PS5, but it's going to be very different looking. It's going to be a lot smaller. It's going to be digital only, and you can buy a disc drive that attaches to it. This is what we've been hearing. We heard Tom Henderson. He gave us an update, and he said that the new console. Now, see what's really strange to me, and I want you guys to give me some input here, because some people are thinking like, well, maybe this is a PS5 Pro, but there's no way it could be. It feels too soon. Now, Tom Henderson recently said that he got in contact with the person, I guess, who revealed this information to him about the new PS5 with a detachable disk drive, and he said that it's already in developers' hands and it works flawlessly. Now, I'm just a little confused about this, because I thought, like, my understanding is with game development is when Sony makes, or a console development, I mean, when Sony makes a new slim console, they're not sending out the new the build of the new console to developers. Developers are still just being sent out dev kits. Like, that's what developers make PlayStation games on, dev kits. And as far as I'm aware, the dev kits don't change. So this is confusing me a little bit, because I guess I'm just saying, like, I don't see why Sony would have to send a dev kit slim. Like, yeah, that doesn't make much sense, though. So I feel like something's a little bit off here, because the only time I feel like developers would get a new dev kit would be if it was for a pro model with different internal specs. Right? So, my thought process, you're saying dev kits change. Yeah, well, you might be right about that. That I'm not sure. I'm not a developer, I don't know the ins and outs like you. That sounds like it could be true. Could be Sony has different versions of dev kits. I guess I wonder why, though. Like, maybe it's something they wanted to test. I guess it's just strange to me, because it's like, if the only real change with this console revamp is that, it's a detachable, like, you can detach the disk drive. I just feel like that's not, I don't know. It's really hard to figure it out, because look, I know this may sound crazy to people, but the reason why a lot of people are thinking maybe it could be a Pro is because, let's not forget, Sony announced the PS4 Pro just 3 years after the PS4 was out. I'm not saying we need a Pro model. I'm just saying that's what Sony did last gen. 3 years later, the Pro model was announced. I don't think that's what's happening, but it is worth noting. It is worth noting that back in 2021, I think it was early 2021, there were some people who claimed that they had contacts with Sony. I forget who they were, but they were saying that, yeah, Sony's working on a Pro model. Yeah, that's true too. I see a lot of people saying like it's the leap wouldn't be justified. Like there just hasn't been, like the PS5 is still pretty cutting edge, and that's true. Yeah, maybe more storage. Matt York, member for 10 months, saying next stream, still next Friday, featuring Crackdown 3. Well, actually, my next podcast, my final podcast of 2022, will be on Friday, on the 23rd. So I'll put it out earlier for people so they know. And you'll see it on your subscription feed. But no Crackdown 3. I don't know what we're going to talk about. We'll see. Because my next podcast after that one is going to be on January 1st. So I have to I mean there's going to be like almost no news whatsoever. So I'm going to have to really think about what I want to discuss with you guys and what I want to talk about. Saying ABG devs get access to new dev kits for new hardware always at least 1 year ahead of the planned release. Yeah. Well, I feel like there's not too much to say on this topic, which is kind of why I saved it for a later topic. But what I will say is that I'm most interested to see how the PS5's design changes, because I'm going to be honest, I feel like the design of the PS5 that we have now, I don't think it's ideal. I think it's interesting, and I think in some ways it does look cool because it really does kind of stand out. But I always kind of felt like, this console is it's a colossus, it's a 10-pound massive console. And I think the biggest thing that Sony really is trying to figure or doing with this new version of the PS5 is they need to cut down the amount of materials needed for to produce the PS5, because dude, this thing is huge, and Sony's planning on making 2023 like a prime year for the PS5, and they're going to want to try to find a way to produce as many as they can. And I think that this executive that we talked about in the video yesterday, this executive basically teased that they have new hardware for 2023. It sounds like they really figured something out, and they're excited to show it off. And we could see it next month, guys. Just a heads up. I don't know that we will, but we could, because CES is next month, and PlayStation's had a presence at CES for the past 2 years in a row. So we'll see. Saying put up a vote for what you want to do on Friday. Maybe. I'll think about it. But yeah, if the new PS5 model looks good enough, I mean, I was already planning on eventually getting another PS5. I'll probably get the new model as long as I can afford to do so. But I was always planning on eventually getting another one. Sewell, you're saying any news on the Switch Pro? No, I haven't heard anything. I haven't really been following it too much. I mean, I feel like there were all those rumors of a Switch Pro, and then like even credible sources were coming out and talking about it, and then just like nothing happened. But I imagine it's gonna have to come soon. I imagine that Nintendo's approaching that point where they have to bring out a new piece of hardware. And I mean, yeah, that's gonna be interesting to see what the Switch Pro can end up looking like, because I feel like the Switch has been out for a while now, and I feel like technology has vastly improved. So saying there's nothing official on a Switch Pro yet, yeah, I don't recall seeing anything official. But I imagine it's probably something that's in the works. I would be shocked if it wasn't. Um. All right. Well, guys, I think at this point, I've pretty much covered all the topics I could. Nakamichi, member for 11 months, you're saying Microsoft complaining about Sony exclusives is unnecessary. A handful of them are multi-plat now. Microsoft didn't care about Persona until they were able to get it on Game Pass. Then all of a sudden they care. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's I think an argument that Sony really could start making themselves is like Sony's become more multi-platform than ever before. Sony's also been embracing PC, Sony's starting to embrace mobile. So that's, yeah, it's a good argument that can be made. But guys, I think with that, I'm going to end the podcast here. We did talk a little bit about The Last of Us Part 3. I was going to talk about the Hogwarts Legacy situation and how they dropped the old consoles, but there's not, realistically, I don't know that there's much I can say about that. It's time to just move on. We're going into 2023. All right, guys, that is going to do it for episode, what is this? I always forget, 139 of Press X Podcast. My final episode of the year will be actually episode 140. And it'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what we can talk about. Mark Tech, you're saying your stream lasted longer than the World Cup final. Wow. It's funny too, because this is actually, I think, it's not on the shorter side, but it's a lot of my podcasts go up to 4 hours, but not this time. But yeah, I think we covered some solid topics here today. I'm going to try, I'm really hoping, and I'm going to set this goal for next year, although, it's not a goal. It's not a goal. All I'm going to say is that come 2023, I'm going to try and I'm going to hope that it's easy for me to not talk too much about the Activision Blizzard situation, simply because I feel like this topic has kind of dominated a lot of 2022. I have a feeling that it's not going to happen though, but that's my hope. And what I'm really hoping is that come next year, we just have other things to talk about that are more interesting. That's my hope. 2023, I think, is looking good, but yeah, we still got one more podcast before we're into the new year. So, all right, just do me one last favor, guys, before you head out. Yeah, creating impossible goals. Yep. Please hit that like button for me. I'd really appreciate that. I want to give a big shout out to everybody who donated a super chat, to all of my channel members, to all of my new channel members. Thank you. And yeah, I appreciate the continued support you guys show my channel here. I will try my best. I will try my best to keep the content flowing throughout, the remainder of December. So look forward to that. It'll be interesting to see what may happen between now and the end of the year. But yeah, I appreciate you guys still checking my videos out. And yeah, that does it, man. That's episode 139 in the books. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their Sunday. And and I will catch you guys in the next stream again, Friday, December 23rd, 6. I'm shooting for 6 p.m. Eastern. If the time changes, you'll know. I'll have it set up on YouTube. That'll be the final podcast of the year. But all right, guys, until next time, take care.